My name is Dr. Georgene Best Montgomery, Interim Chair of the Department of English and Modern Languages. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all here today, the opening session of the 49th Annual Writers Workshop Conference. We do have a smorgasbord of event sessions for you all today. So when you all leave here today, please tell your friends, your classmates to come and enjoy, to feast on the literary plates, tables that we have prepared for you. We're going to have on our program a song by Zora Indigo Montgomery. And if you notice that we have the same name, she's my daughter, who can sing when her mama can't. I was told that I could carry a tune. They said they just didn't know where I was taking it. And Zora is also the goddaughter of our keynote speaker today, Tina Mackerel ANSA, whom I had the pleasure of meeting 30 years ago when Georgia Southern, where I was a professor, gave her the Georgia Authors Book Award. And I drove to St. Simon and picked her up, and we have been best buds ever since. We were rushing here this morning because I got up, made breakfast. Tina showed me how to make French pressed coffee. And we sat there, and my daughter gave me a massager for my birthday, so we were enjoying the massager and conversation. And then we looked up, because we were up at 7:30 this morning. We said, where did the time go? And I got here on 2 wheels. That maximum 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds, we did that today. So thank you all for coming. So first up, we have Zora Indigo Montgomery. And she will be followed by our best Sheba A. Ram, also known as Queen Sheba because she is the queen of the mic, queen of spoken word. And before her introduction to Miss ANSA, Queen Sheba is going to treat us to a feast of her poetry. Zora Indigo Montgomery.
Hello. I didn't know I was singing today until like yesterday. So, how do you do this? There we go. Just gonna do something I do all the time. This is Billie Holiday. It's one of my favorites. All right. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day and through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. You can find me at the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Thank you.
A 10-year-old walks out of my grandmother's closet. A mini Southern Baptist diva too young to know what diva is struts out. Hat flapping over her face, wicker bending to kiss the side of her cheek after every step, a wide yellow bow trailing down her back where one day she hopes her wedding dress would be. One white glove hand imitating a frantic fanning of the face as if she was just to pass out from heat exhaustion. Pearls draped 4 times around her neck and red lipstick smeared from ear to elbow, one of those Kodak moments. Good thing digital wasn't out then. Too many things to erase and forget, eaten up by bad memory. First day of 5th grade, does it look like I want my brother's hand-me-downs? I am 2 patent leather Mary Janes and Hello Kitty for that. My mother would dress us in the same Save Mart clothes the entire neighborhood wore. I would always find a phone booth on my way to the bus stop, peeling back jackets I was too ready to grow into. Jeans, not too trendy, not too tight. At recess, we were already practicing hairstylists and clothing designers, switching tops and ideas. Scissors, the original 5-in-1 tool, turned sweatshirts into miniskirts, a perfectly good pair of tights into fishnet, recombing and twisting each other's hair on the steps while boys ran in circles chasing dust. College, my brother's old fatigues turned patchwork skirt, afro, and Angela Davis t-shirt had folk clutching their purses like they were running back trying to make first down. It's Kinko's, people. I'm just trying to copy my chapbook, for Christ's sake. Wanted to get my word out to the people, let them know the revolution was coming, and me wearing my brother's fatigues 24 days straight symbolized my quiet protest till they sent those troops home. Wanted them soldiers to know they was off fighting something they didn't understand or believe in. My brother lost his life 3 days after being sent off to war. Decided his government-issued 9mm tastes better than cold turkey on rye that day for lunch. No note, no nothing. Just some orderlies to clean up his remains. Chunks of his brain tissue caught between the fibers of the mop and the sponge smeared him into the wood grain of the mess hall floors, gives new meaning to driftwood. On vacation, my white parents tried their best to play color match with their Negro child. They were hippies, flower children, caught between the movement and privilege. Adopting me, they said, was their effort to try to save the world. Well, vengeance is mine, said the Lord. Lucky for them, their color would fade. Right here, Cole Auditorium, we are all 21 years old and holding. Forgive me for not sounding or looking like you expect me to. There are 2 type of people in the world, me and everybody else. The awesome thing is you can repeat the same mantra. Found yourself a compact, a rear view, or dark windows on the building as your speed walking through lunch. Repeat 3 times daily and call on me never. This is the part of the poem where I'm supposed to tell you why. Nah, shawty, this is how it's always gonna be. I'm always going left when the world says north. I'm always wearing plaid and polka dots when solids are in. My cadence will always be rocker meets hip hop before life support. And I will always want to slip my wrist after a bad breakup, but I won't because I'm too fly, and that's simple. And this poem is about you and I and how it seems to be a cardinal sin for us to think that we're great. Well, I happen to look up the word cardinal. Much sought after caged bird, highly valued for its song and color. Look, life is like masturbation. Do you? The trick is not to believe you are better. Not to believe that you are better, but never believe you're worse. Go. Thank y'all. Hey, students, for being late. What's up? How y'all doing? Y'all in the VIP section in the back? That's cute. That's wonderful. There's a whole middle section that y'all could fill in. You know, Rosa Parks did some stuff for us back in the day. Come on down, students. Ain't nobody gonna bite y'all. It'll look good for the camera. It'll look like there's a crowd. Who brought a blanket? That was smart. Thank you, students. Y'all are awesome and amazing. Thank you so much. Y'all are just in time for our keynote speaker. Thank you all for coming to our very first event of over 3 days. It's going to be incredible. We have programs up here before you leave. Make sure you tell your friends. that we have 3 days of programming planned for you. And this is the 49th annual. That's awesome. Y'all clap for that. This is not golf. Let's have a better clap than that. Thank you. Even though Tiger Woods didn't make his comeback yesterday, boom. All right, so we're going to have our keynote speaker, and her name is Tina MCELROY ANSA. Tina MCELROY ANSA is a novelist, publisher, filmmaker, teacher, and journalist. Above all, she is a storyteller born and bred in Macon, Georgia, from which her fiction springs. As a writer of fiction and nonfiction for more than 35 years, Miss ANSA has been hailed as a working icon of the African American written and spoken word. She has published 5 novels, all set in the mythical town of Mulberry, Georgia. They are Baby of the Family, Ugly Ways, The Hand I Fan With, You Know Better, and Taking After Madeir. She was the recipient of the 2011, is it B.B. Moore Campbell Memorial Award from the National Book Club Conference. She has been awarded the 2005 Stanley W. Lindbergh Award for her body of work and for contributions to the literary arts community of Georgia. Ms. ANSA has also been inducted into International Literary Hall of Fame for writers of African descent at the Gwendolyn Brooks Center of Chicago State University. In March 2007, Ms. ANSA launched her independent publishing company, Down South Press, with its focus on African American literature, fiction, and nonfiction. 10 years ago, Ms. ANSA established the Sea Island Writers Retreat. That sounds fun. And on Sapelo, how do you say that? Sapelo Island, Georgia. Where is that at? Down south. Okay, all right. The annual retreats have been held in different locations in the Georgia Sea Islands. The workshop assists emerging and established writers in honoring their work and skills in fiction, nonfiction, memoir, and editing in sessions with professional writers and editors. She also has taken the Sea Island Writers Retreats to college campuses, including Spelman College, whoop, whoop, Clark Atlanta, whoop, whoop, and Bethune-Cookman University to nurture and teach young writers their skills for success. Tina MCELROY ANSA has been a regular contributor to the award-winning television series CBS Sunday Morning with her essays, Postcards from Georgia. Ms. ANSA writes magazine and newspaper articles, op-ed pieces, and book reviews for the Los Angeles Times, the New York Newsday, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Charlotte Observer, come on somebody, and the Florida Times-Union. In addition to lecturing and reading at universities, colleges, libraries, conferences, book festivals, and bookstores around the country, the author has lectured at the Smithsonian African American Center Author Series, the Richard Wright / Zora Neale Hurston Foundation, the Penn Faulkner Reading Series, the Folger Shakespeare Library, the Schomburg Center, and the Penn American Center in New York City. This is an amazing bio. You guys should be excited about this, students. This is awesome. If we can only be as half as great. In April 2011, Ms. ANSA received an honorary doctorate of arts from her alma mater, Spelman College, in Atlanta, Georgia. She has been a writer in residence twice at her alma mater, Spelman College, and at Bethune-Cookman University. For more information and to reach Ms. ANSA, you can go on MySpace. No, I'm just kidding. You go to the websites, www.tinamcelroyansa.com or www.downsouthpress.com. Please put your hands together and a lot of excitement, students, for your keynote speaker, Ms. Tina MCELROY ANSA.
Also, I forgot to say, we are giving door prizes. Hey. Whoop, whoop. So y'all want to listen because I'll be asking a question, and these are good door prizes. We'll be giving them away every day. It could be $25. I'm just saying, don't y'all want the money? It could be books. Like one of the things we're giving away is Michelle Obama's Becoming. Anybody interested in that? Right. We're going to be giving away one of Tina's books, The Hand I Fan With, that she'll be reading from today. We also have, signed. We also have wonderful things from the CAU bookstore. So $40. I'm just saying, so you got to be present to win, but y'all don't know when we're going to be giving all those things away, so you want to come back every time.
this in here? Okay. All right, I'm going to stand out here. This podium, I'll read there, but this podium feels like it's between you and me, and I don't like that. Is everybody here? I mean, can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, wonderful. Well, this is a real joy to be here. I have been here been invited a couple of times before, but I'm always so thrilled when I come back to the AU campus because so many memories. I was telling my godchild, who was a beautiful singer this morning, wasn't she wonderful? No music, no nothing. She just, I mean, just like Ella Fitzgerald, you know, just stand in front of it and it just comes out. Such a gift. But I was telling my little schoolgirl that I was so in love with a guy named Michael Choice, who went to Clark AU. I was at Spelman. And oh God, he was a football player. And he was so, I mean, every time I come on this camp, I was telling her, I was in love, but he was just moving through. But every time I come back to any of the campuses, I'm just flooded with memories, just wonderful memories. And as writers, you know, I am finally coming to see that that's all we have. All we have is our stuff. And people often think that your stuff, especially emerging writers of anything in the audience, be brave. Put them up. Put them up. There you go. There you go. That's a good one. We think, you know, that we have to write from our life. And in some ways, we do have to write from our life. But our life isn't everything we have. It's sort of where we start. And I had a mentor who, he was a New York Times bestselling author when I met him, and I hadn't published anything, but he was like really, he read my stuff. He's the one who got me my first agent, William Morris agent, and he had only done that for 2 people in his whole career. And he had a beautiful house on St. Simon's Island down by the ocean, and we were poor. My husband and I, we called ourselves, we were freelancers. We said we did anything. So we moved to St. Simon's Island, which is in South Georgia, off the coast of Brunswick, Georgia. And, you know, thinking my husband was a cinematographer and a filmmaker, and he had made documentaries, and I'd been a journalist and been a freelancer, and, you know, we were going to move there because we went there for our honeymoon, and that's where we wanted to live, and it was the ocean, it was our people's stuff. You know, our stuff, I don't know if anybody's from the Sea Island, Savannah, or any along the coast, but, you know, our stuff, black folks' stuff, just hangs in the air. You know, everything you see that's old was built by us. Probably designed by us. The lighthouse there was designed by us. My husband and I were docents at the lighthouse, and you know, all the pictures they talked about, I can't even remember his name. Some man, you know, who built the lighthouse, and then, you know, somebody else who rebuilt it. And we said, you know, he didn't build the lighthouse. He may have designed it, but you know, you know who built the lighthouse and whose skills were there. And they actually went back in their archives and found pictures, and it was the building site for the second time. Nothing but black men. Nothing. There wasn't even a white overseer man there. Nothing but black people. And so they brought it out. That's why you should speak up. Speaking up is a wonderful thing. You know, just speak up. Just say, you know, why is that like that? Or don't you think the black folks built the lighthouse? You think we can find some kind of documentation of that? Or, you know, my family did this, and this is how we did it. You know, you talk about inclusivity. You have to really work for that, unfortunately. You know, it's not something, and you get tired of it. You know, everybody in here probably has been the only black person at the table sometimes. And I know when I was a journalist, I used to say, oh, come on, don't make me come up with the black story this week. You know, we'd have the meetings. I said, you know, y'all think about that. Y'all think about, you know, not just writing about white people. Okay. But I was saying as writers, you know, you think sometimes that you have to have lived a certain kind of way, you know, an exciting life to write exciting things. And so my mentor and I, he'd been in World War II, and he'd been a bombardier in World War II. He had this exciting life. And he would talk about all, you know, coming back from the war and seeing his father in Brooklyn in the middle of the street, coming back drunk from the taverns and all. And I would sit and talk about what my mama smelled like when she went to work, and what she smelled like when she came back, because my father owned juke joints and liquor stores, and she, you know, put on her perfume in the morning because she helped out at the place. That's what my father called it, helping out. She ran the fucking place, okay? But again, she helped out. I won't even go down that. I won't go down that woman's road, okay? But y'all know what I mean. And I would say, talk about my mother cooking grits every morning, putting on a pot of water for grits, and what my father, I would just talk about, sort of my life, and he would stop me because he was as fascinated with that. Eating grits every morning, and with butter, whether you ate them with, no, we didn't eat them with cream and that kind of thing. And he taught me. He would look at me and say, "Oh, Tina, that's gold, Gold. That's gold." And he says, "But I thought about that so much." He says, "Spread it out." He told me, "Don't put everything in your first book. We're gonna be writing a lot of books now. Don't put everything in there. Spread it out." But he would always tell me, "What you been doing with your gold today? What you been doing with your gold?" And he talked about it so much that I thought about it a great deal. And I thought, well, gold is like, I see it like a vein, like running through my whole body. But gold just doesn't come and give itself up. You got to dig for gold. You got to find where the gold is. You got to mine it. And when you're finished, you only have ore. Then you got to melt it down into jewelry or chalices or a bullion or whatever. It's work to find your gold. But everybody has gold. I have students who have asked, well, I grew up in the suburbs, and, I don't know nothing about the city, and, assuming that they had to write about that, what was popular then. But I tell them, no, see your gold, mine your gold. What is it? How did your mama call you in from when it started getting dark and you were out playing? Did your mama call you in? Did you have a mama? Who raised you? Did you raise yourself? I mean, all of that is your own personal gold, and it's not autobiography. Your gold is just where you began. That's just your jumping off point. Your gold is seeing the richness in your heritage. Your gold is seeing the richness in your neighborhood. Your gold is seeing, how maybe you had to scramble to eat every day. I mean, that's gold. Your gold is, getting a car when you're 16. It doesn't matter sort of where you come from. You just got to recognize that all that stuff is your gold. First time you had sex, how was that like? I mean, that's all your gold. How did you get to college? How did you get here? Are you the first one in your family, or were you expected to come to college? I mean, that's your gold. But you got to dig that up. You got to know the difference between real gold and fool's gold. Lots of people chase fool's gold. Other people get books published on fool's gold. Not real stuff. Real. And things don't have to be intense all the time. You just have to know what your gold is. So I grew up in middle Georgia, Macon, Georgia, a while ago, turn of the last century. I'm sorry, the middle, not that old, in the middle of the century, and when black people of color, were really discovering themselves, really, going out into the world, we were fighting. It's a time of civil rights act that really changed, 1964, that really changed in the South, really changed segregation, opened up a lot of doors for us. But at the middle of the century, I also noticed that things were just turning just a little bit. And people were doing things differently. And for black people, we were coming out into a world that we really hadn't been in before. And things were changing in us and in how we were going to go into the world and how we saw each other. Were we going to take what we were into the world? Something as seemingly small as, eating watermelon out in public. Or, letting people know that, that you were from the country and you ate chitlins. All of that. But it's also a time that I noticed that before desegregation, we were so unselfconsciously black. Anybody here old enough to hear their grandparents and their mothers talk about that? We were who we were in the world. It was when we sort of came out into the larger world, it was then start questioning yourself, well, okay, should I wear that? We're still doing it. They're still saying you can't wear your hair a certain way, And so you have to kind of fight always and make a decision whether you do it or not. What was I going to be out in that world? Was I going to be my authentic self? or was I going to change my voice? You know, we all, you know, code switch, we all do that. You know, you have to do that. But I'm going to change who I really am. As they say, used to say, am I going to start talking proper now? Oh, Lord, he done gone to college, and now you can't even understand him. He talks so proper, you can't understand him. You know, are we going to do all of that? So I always knew I was a writer. I was one of those little girls who listened to I listened to anybody's stories. My father owned juke joints and liquor stores, and it was full of stories. Full of stories. I don't know if you're familiar with the moth storytelling hour. I did a moth story about my first time I made love, but it was also about growing up in Macon. And so I came of age at that time, and you know, I went to a desegregated Catholic school first year that they had black folks there, and so I mean I had to make a lot of decisions right quick, you know, who I was going to be in the world. I didn't know I was doing that, but that's exactly what I was doing. And what I noticed is that, you know, we're very self-conscious still in the world. We still are sort of checking ourselves out at different times. It's very, very challenging to be your authentic self in a world that does not validate you, the way you don't see yourself as often. Dr. Bess and I were talking last night, but Crazy Rich Asians was on. And we were just sort of looking at it, and when we got to the end, we both looked at each other, and we had the same thought, and that was, everybody likes to see themselves on the screen. Because it was just a, you know, rom-com, you know. We knew they were going to get together in the end. We knew he was going to surprise her somewhere. But, you know, but there was all that richness of Asian culture, you know, in that movie. And we just like to see ourselves on the screen. Everybody likes to see themselves on the screen. Everybody likes to see themselves represented. And so I knew I was going to write, but I was a journalist, but I really wanted to write fiction. I always wanted to write our stories. And we moved to St. Simon's Island, and it's off the coast of a small town, Brunswick, Georgia. And I was there for a while, and I'm trying to write, and I'm writing about ghosts, really. I'm writing about spirits. I'm writing about family. And I started noticing that in this small town of Brunswick, black people were unselfconsciously black. They were black like I remember, like back in the, you know, 50s and 60s, you know, before, you know, black women would stand at the Piggly Wiggly, you know, and talk about, oh, grandmama came back to me last night. She did. Well, what did she say? I mean, unselfconsciously black, you know, talk about everything in front of anybody. And it was like the most wonderful thing in the world. I was like, damn, these people are like black. They're like, you know, old-time black. You know, they don't care who's listening. They don't care who's around. They are their authentic selves. And I started noticing how much they talked about ghosts. And I was born with a caul over my face. Anybody know that? A veil, the thin membrane that children are born with. Some children, it's not rare, it's uncommon. And there are all kinds of beliefs in every culture, Native American culture, in British culture. David Copperfield in Charles Dickens' works was born with a caul. Whenever I say that, my husband used to travel with me, and the first time he heard me say that, he told me afterwards, well, don't you think you could come up with somebody other than that magician? Why do you care about that magician? I said, no, babe, no, David Copperfield, the book. I said, don't show your illiterateness. But at any rate, so, you know, it's all over the world, you know, especially in the Caribbean, especially in Africa, it's always, the child is always special in some way. You know, in my culture, when I was growing up in the American South, it was that the child could see things. You know, the child could see ghosts. That was the biggest thing. But she could also look at you and tell who you are. She could feel certain things. She had visions, always special. In many Native American cultures, that's where the medicine man, the quote medicine man was. You know, in other cultures, you know, because you were special. You were special. And I hadn't heard anybody talk about that in forever because what? We had moved into the wider culture and, you know, dropped a lot of things. Don't want to talk about no ghosts because I saw even then when I wrote Baby the Family in the 80s that if ghosts were mentioned in the wider culture, it would be like, it would immediately go back to a nigger joke. It would be like, you know, eyes would get wide and even in cartoons, they're like 20 years ago stopped running those cartoons, you know, where the black person would be like a monkey probably, and then the hair, and then ghosts were mentioned. Anytime ghosts were mentioned, you know, the hair would stand, hair like mine would stand on end, you know, and it was, ooh, feet don't fail me now. You know, they turned, I started thinking about this. I said, wait a minute, that's not how I saw ghosts when I was younger. That's not how it was done in my family. They kind of made a joke about me born with a cough, but they asked me to rub the cough when it wouldn't start. Come on, baby. My mama would say, come over here, rub the cough, and put the magic on it. That's what they called it. Come on, baby, put the magic on it. You know, my cousins would come over, and the big thing would be we go in a dark room, they'd stand on my feet, look over my shoulders, because you were supposed to be able to see a ghost. And they get mad at me when they didn't see a ghost, because they will always say, you keeping us from seeing ghosts. You know, the more I start thinking about this, the more I start thinking, this is so wonderful and rich. And when ghosts were mentioned in my house, it was either reverence, oh, I feel grandmama in the room. Oh, you smell that? Oh, that smells just like Big Daddy. It was a really wonderful thing. You know, in my household, when the ghosts were mentioned, it was all differently. My great-grandmother, who was a beautiful, you know, tissue paper thin, you couldn't run around great-grandmama. I didn't know my grandmamas, but I knew my great-grandmama. And, but she had stories, and when she told stories, it was different from when her daughter, who was a good religious woman, told stories. She told ghost stories like, okay, you know, Mr. Jones died, and he was a mean man. He wouldn't even feed you if you was hungry. And when he died, he was at the funeral home, and flies came all around and just covered the whole place. And then, you know, somebody went to the door that night, and they opened the door, and there he was, and he was holding his head in his hand. Ah! Oh, my goodness. We'd run around. My big daddy would tell us those kind of stories just to get us screaming and hollering and running around, because he didn't have to take care of us. He could leave, you know, and Mama had to take care of us all night and, you know, sleep in the bed with us. You know, my great aunt, Elizabeth, was a good Christian woman, and she always was, you know, kind of preaching, and she would tell ghost stories, you know, that told a parable, you know, about, you know, how you were in life, it was how you're going to be, you know, be good, be good, be good. And my great-grandmother, I mentioned, who would tell ghost stories to calm us down, to, you know, let us know that things were going to be all right. You know, grandmama old now, and she gonna be passing soon, y'all know that. But if you feel somebody sitting at the foot of your bed sometimes, you know, don't be scared. That's just your grandmama. She's sitting down there watching. I said, what a way to calm a child down. You know, I don't want to think about that. But, you know, I started thinking of all the ways that ghost stories were used in the African-American culture. Just in African-American culture, ghost stories. And I started thinking, you know, shoot, I'm gonna grab that back. You know, I just wanted to grab back ghost stories, you know, and throw them down on the ground and just roll on them, just the way the folks in Brunswick did, who told ghost stories at the doctor's office, who talked about dreams openly. And that, I found out, was what? Oh, it was my goal. That was my goal. Ghost stories and spirits and the occult and the metaphysical and all of that, and how that all came together for me and my stories. Are we getting time? Now, and I want to read a little bit, but what I am telling all the people who raised their hands, who said they were writers, all the people who didn't raise their hands because they're afraid to admit that they're writers, because somebody's going to say, well, what you got published? You got to duck your head and say, well, I ain't got it. You know, you're a writer because you claim to be a writer, and you write every day. You're a writer because you're doing something in the world. You're a writer because you're brave enough to send your stories off to get published. You know, you're a writer because you're brave enough to come up to a writer after a reading and say, you know, this is what I'm working on. I'm having a little trouble with this. Can you help me? You're a writer because you follow all the writers that you love on Twitter and Facebook. And you listen to, because you follow them, you can get little mini workshops. That's all we tweet about is our work. Okay? All right. Well, I want to read. I'll read from Hamlet. This is the Hand I Fan With. It is the story of Lena McPherson, who is also the eponymous baby of the family in my first novel, who's born with a call. She's grown now, and Lena has lots of stuff. Lena has everything. You know, you're supposed to be lucky if you're born with a call. And Lena is very, very lucky in life, in material things. Her parents have died. Her only two brothers have passed on, and she's in her early to mid 40s. She still looks really good. She looks really good. Let me stop saying still. She looks really good, but she has lots of property. She inherited all her parents' land. She inherited their juke joints, what she owns. She started her own real estate company, but she only hires women. She doesn't even get in trouble for only hiring women. She's living the life. She has a beautiful house out on the river. There's a river that runs through Mulberry, which is my little town. And she has an estate out there. She has stables because she loves horses. She has heated. She has everything. She has the first sports car off the line because she sat next to the designer on the plane, and she was able to buy it, and so she has the only one that's out now. She has all of that, but she doesn't have love. She takes care of the whole town because she got money. I had a friend I used to go to, Lord, all the time, for a long, and she would tell me the sweetest thing. And I said, oh, I just hate to always come back to you. She said, you go to the person who got it. Isn't that wonderful? You go to the person, don't feel bad about that. Ain't no need of asking all these other people, they ain't got it, How generous. Anyway, but she has all of these things, but she doesn't have anybody in her life who cares about her particularly. And she doesn't have, she doesn't have a man. She has men in and out of her life, but not anybody that she can continue dating because she's born with a call and she can see things. And unfortunately, somebody that she really likes and she sees him being mean to an animal. What is that about? Why do that? Okay. But at any rate, she and her best friend, who's a anthropologist, get together, and sister, that's what they call her, sister says, Lena, you were born with a call. I remember all that stuff you used to be able to do. She said, we need to conjure you up a man. And they get, drunk. They go on a little wine one night, and a little, they smoke a little weed. You know how you get with your girlfriends, they do a little ceremony, an authentic ceremony, but they do a ceremony out under the moon, out on Lena's deck. And they ask for a kind man, a sweet, generous man, a smart man. Oh, God, a man who really knows a woman's body. I mean, they ask for everything lined up, everything that they want. And they just forget about it because, they were kind of playing, half not. And Lena starts feeling things. First, it's a breeze on her neck. Almost brings her to orgasm while she's driving. Then her heated pool, all of a sudden, is cold when she jumps in it. And then she's taking a shower, and she hears somebody say outside, clearing his voice. And that's all of our women. I don't know if men know that, but that's all the women's biggest fear. You in the shower, you naked. The only tool you got is a loofah pad and a loofah, and somebody's in your house. And she looks out, and this man appears. First, kind of like the overlays in biology books, where there's the bone, the structure, and then the muscle on it, and then the skin, and that's how he appears to her. And his name is Herman, which I love. And he is a 100-year-old ghost. He wasn't a slave. His family were maroons. And he's been watching Lena for 100 years, helping her. He's the one at her shoulders. He's the one saying, and he gets realer and realer and realer. And he comes in her life and changes it. And I love this part so much, I'm going to read this. Everybody grown in here? Anybody not grown? Okay, all right. This is called Little Sis. Herman first showed his face in April. By late May, when they could clearly see the sea serpent and the crab in the night sky, he had come up with 100 ways to call Lena baby. Sometimes he sounded avuncular, like her father's protective old friends and card-playing buddies. Sometimes he said it real sexy, like sexy old men in town who said, hey, baby, like they didn't know they were old. To Lena, the South seemed full of sexy old men who reminded her of Ray Charles or Mr. Jerome. Mr. Jerome was a man in his 80s, both of whose legs had been amputated 20 years before, and he still made the nurses' aides at the Mulberry Arms Retirement Village giggle whenever they came in and announced whirlpool. Sometimes Herman said baby briskly, almost business-like, like, hey, baby, hand me that wrench. Usually Herman said it as if it were part of her name, Lena baby. He said Lena baby as if it were one word. Other times he crooned it, Lena baby, like a four-word song. And other times it was hardly a word, rather a groan. Oh, baby. As far as Lena was concerned, he couldn't say it enough. It was easier than anyone would have thought for Lena to fall into a relationship with Herman, a ghost. They were comfortable with each other from the first night that they danced and ate and loved together. She treasured the camaraderie she and Herman shared, their walks and tramps through the woods around her house that evoked childhood and represented the banishment of woodland demons. She felt heart-bursting pride in his mechanical and engineering acumen, as much as he seemed to feel over her special skills. She loved to awake with a wisp of his scent still lingering on the sheet next to her, enough for her to roll over into and snuggle into for a few minutes before rising. She loved to do for him and make over him, but the one thing that she loved and treasured above all else was their lovemaking. Lena and Herman fucked until her toes tingled. Herman discovered that what he couldn't even buy in Middle Georgia back in his time, Lena was happy to give and receive. The first time that they made love and he kissed and licked her vagina, he just knew he had gone too far. When she returned the favor, he felt like he had truly died and gone to heaven. Lena learned over and over again that this man, this spirit, this ghost, this specter was no ordinary man. While Herman made Lena's pussy sing, Lena had heard women down at her father's place use that expression, "Girl, I ain't going nowhere. That man made my pussy sing last night." Lena hadn't had all that much experience with sex, but she thought that she knew what it meant. After Herman, however, she realized she had not had a clue. Herman really did make her stuff, as he called it, sing. At first, he thought it was Herman down there between her legs, singing and humming to himself in exultation and ecstasy as he kissed and sucked and tickled and licked and nipped and bit her. She knew that it must have been Herman down there humming against her clitoris, giving her what he called a buzz. Then she realized it wasn't Herman's voice she heard, but one that sounded like her own if she had been able to sing. Her pussy let out such a beautiful, lilting, happy song with no real words that Lena and Herman had to stop what they were doing and just lie back and listen for a while. Lena stretched her arms above her head toward the headboard of the bentwood bed, and Herman just laid his head on her stomach, his thick mat of hair tickling her belly button, and brushed his lips across her pubic hair. Dr. Bess, Lena herself couldn't sing a note on command. She couldn't carry a tune on a brass bucket. That's what her grandmama used to say when she heard the girl trying to sing Love Child or some current hit of hers around the house. She'd say, "Ooh, good thing Lena pretty and smart, Nellie," because she sure couldn't sing for her supper. The girl can't carry a tune on a brass bucket. Now that same Lena had a pussy that sang in perfect pitch. Although the song seemed to float on the air, happy feathery notes that altogether made a new tune each time her vagina sang, it was not a high-pitched tone. Rather, Lena thought it sounded low and sexy like an alto. Herman had just thought it sounded like his woman, Lena. He knew he was the cause of the dulcet tones, and he was so proud that he just looked up at Lena and grinned. Reaching for each other, Lena and Herman exchanged a hard, deep, urgent, hungry kiss, and their love set Lil Sis, as Herman also called it, off again. Some days the song sounded more like a musical instrument than a voice. Those days it reminded Lena the sound of a cello, but it was still deep from within her. It was still a voice deep from within her that indeed had been unleashed by Herman. The first time it happened in public, Lena just covered her lips with two fingers and turned red in the face as she thought of Herman and the way he played her like a Stradivarius. She felt that way in his hands, like a masterpiece, a one-of-a-kind treasure that was being cherished. Lena noticed other folks in the Piggly Wiggly around her this has happened the first time, the Piggly Wiggly. Lena noticed other folks in the Piggly Wiggly around her and were staring at her with their heads cocked to the side. An old man appeared at her shoulder and his head cocked to the side. He said, Now, don't tell me. I know that song. I ain't heard it in a long time, you humming. But what is that song? What is it? I can't tell you." And then the old fella tried to remember, and then eventually sighed, drawing a blank, and looked at Lena for help. But the only help she could give the old man trying to remember the name of that tune was to hold her knees together and try not to burst into laughter in his face. Until she got the voice under some kind of control where it only sang when she and Herman were together, she had to resign herself to being embarrassed by the siren song, even during Mass, when her stuff sang along with the choir. Thank you. This is the book that we're giving away. I'll sign it for you. Thank you so much.
The first hand that goes up. So y'all got to raise your hands. Tina's husband's name. She don't, that's her godfather. She don't get to play. You'll get a book. Okay, anybody know Tina's husband's name? Anybody knows the name of Tina's, oh God, I can't ask that question without giving away the name. No, can't answer that question. Where's Tina McElroy ANSA from? I got one more. I got another book to give away. Who wants the other book? Okay. What is the name of Tina's made-up town? Anybody? Name of Tina's made-up town. All of her novels are set in this town. Yes. Mulberry? Yay! You get a copy of Michelle Obama's Becoming. All right. So, Tina, let's move on. So, Tina, let's move on to the next part of the stage program. Welcome you all who are coming in. We'll be giving away more door prizes. Let's go on up and get started on the conversation part, talking about writing. Okay, you want to sit here? You want to go up to the chairs? Okay, okay, we're going to sit here. Yeah. So I know some are coming in and others are leaving. Thank you all for coming. You all please keep up with the program and come to our other events. It is. I asked Ms. Jackson if she could get somebody to turn it. Thank you. It is cold in here. So you all have just heard Ms. ANSA read this very sexy, erotic portion of her novel. Zora, could you give her that? The gift. Thank you. Oh, let's, Zora, excuse me, those of you for one, let's take a picture. Zora, you got my camera? Oh, just take it with yours. Miss ANSA's going to be around through Wednesday, so come on back. So let's take a picture of the winners of the, hold up your book. So our winners. Oh, let me get in. Thank you.
date, y'all?
Tax day for the grown people here. Isn't it tax day? Okay, Miss Hanson, what prompted you to write such a sexy text, sexy novel?
Well, actually, I started thinking about this when I was a little girl.
Okay.
Because my mother was a big reader, and she had books everywhere, and she gave books to us for Christmas, and along with socks and pajamas and stuff. We always got books, and we read a lot, and reading was a treasure in our home. And my mother had books everywhere, but the books that I really liked were the books she had on the bedside table, because there she had, Lady Chatterley's Lover, thank you. East of Eden.
Lady Chatterley Lover?
About the lady, literally a lady, with the gardener. And it's very, very sexy, very erotic. It was banned in the United States and many countries, as a matter of fact. It's very erotic. So she had all these kinds of books about table, not porn, but sexy books. And of course, I wasn't allowed to read them. I was, I could read, and she called me, she saw me reading them. Oh no, she would tell me she's the one who made the distinction for me between reading good literature and reading trash. And she would tell me, well, you can read trash if you want to. My sister used to read the romance magazines that would come, exactly. And the woman almost would always get her killed or something, those stories. And she said, you can read that. She said, well, you can read literature. And she says, there's nothing wrong with this book at all. It's just not ready for you. You're not ready for it. This is an adult book. You have to bring something to it. Oh, she took time to explain, and I agreed and everything. But she had a bedside table, and her and Daddy's bed was here, and then bedside table and the wall. So there's this little aisle between the wall, just big enough for a little girl to scoot down in and reach up and get those books and stay down there all day long reading. And it was wonderful, but I didn't know enough about life and sex and all that, so I didn't understand. I went to Catholic school, and we had processions, and the nuns would get roses that grew on the fence, to put in our hair. And then I would read in Lady Chatterley's Lover about him weaving flowers in her hair. He was talking about pubic hair. I didn't know that's what they were talking about. And I thought, well, what's the big deal? We do that at school, for Mary, Mother of Jesus. So, I was confused, and I really kind of understood what my mother said about I just wasn't ready for it. I spent a lot of time at my father's juke joints and liquor stores, and they were full of stories. That's why I like for you to look at go online and go to the moth stories, because I did a wonderful story about my first time, and I got all of that from the people who hung out at my father's juke joints, and some of them were school principals, because that was the only place for black folks to go then. They didn't have nice nightclubs. You couldn't go to white folks stuff, and so the juke joints were a place where everybody sort of congregated. And you see folks who rode on the back of garbage trucks, and the folks who teach your children sit inside, having a beer. But they told stories, and I was there all the time, because I love the place. I love the people down there. They were my friends and compatriots. And but these were older people, and they were in there, trying to have a little drink and trying to sweetheart, and all of that. And at first, when a child is in an inappropriate place, everybody goes, oh, no, don't say shit, there's a baby there. But hell, you there every Saturday, these people want to drink, they want to relax. They don't got time, they got their own children to be worrying about. So, you become like the Lay's potato chips sign, the bluebird grapefruit sign. You're there all the time. And so people stopped censoring themselves and started telling these stories, and they will always love stories. Oh, my goodness, that man made me feel good last night. Oh, my goodness, unrequited love, wonderful love, first-time love. This is what they talked about, what was going on in their lives. And I would think, oh, good old juicy stories. That's just, so wonderful. But again, I was too young to understand. I'd hear phrases, and I'd think, oh, that sounds so good, because I always loved words, but I didn't know what it meant. So this was sort of in the back of my head, but I also noticed that the stories at the place were about people who looked like me and were like me, but the stories I read and slipped and read were always white people. Mm-hmm. And of course, this was a time where you didn't see people kissing on the screen, you know, or television. Never on, we weren't even on television. You know, we're talking about the 50s and the 60s, early 60s. And so we didn't really, you know, see that. And I thought, well, why are they always white people? You know, I read the Bobbsey twins and Mysteries. What's her name? Nancy Drew. Exactly. You know, well, how come? You know, I used to have adventures. My brothers used to have wonderful adventures in the woods behind the house. They had, you know, secret. I saw my first naked boy, who wasn't my brother, at a place called Plates Rock. It was beautiful. It was a stream that ran in the woods behind my house in Macon, Georgia, that in the town, and there was a waterfall, and it was just a beautiful waterfall. And the boys used to skinny dip there, and girls weren't really allowed. My sister and I snuck behind my brothers once and followed them, and watch. Oh, it was wonderful, as you can imagine. Watch them, watch them play, and they were very free. They were, you know, they were in a different. They were playful. I had never really seen them playful with just all boys, you know, just playing in the water. So this was sort of around me. You know, I don't think that I know. I guess sex is kind of was always around me. It was sex and love and all of that. So I always wanted to write this sexy story. And after I wrote my first novel, Baby of the Family, Lena, you know, lots of my readers fell in love with Lena, and I was riding to a little. On Brunswick, I was driving to the little airport that we had there. It's bigger now, but it was a little airport, and I knew the road. And my husband was taking me to, you know, go on book tour for something. And once you finish a book, before it gets published, you got that long. And so most writers start thinking about their second book while they're kind of finishing up their first book. And so I've been thinking about what I wanted to do, and I said I really wanted to write a love story. So I was talking to my husband about this, and I said I think I'm going to make it Lena, because I really want it to be a love story, but I want to see the love on the page. I want to see the sex on the page. I want to, you know, see what color it is and why she's screaming, because that's what I always used to want. You know, I'd read, they'd always fade out at the good parts. And I said I want my book to fade out. You know, I want it to just be getting started when we get there. And I'm sitting in the car. You know how people who know you will, you know, look at you like, are you nuts? I mean, really? And my husband's driving, and I said, I want to write this love story and a sexy story. And I think I'm going to use Lena, because I think my readers will let me get away with a lot more because they love Lena. And I said, but I have no idea. I don't know who she's going to fall in love with. And I could feel my husband turn slowly and look at me while he was driving. And he said, who else would Lena fall in love with but a ghost? Man, the whole novel just opened up. It was just wonderful. I started thinking, you know, as an element, as a tool for a writer. That's why I like ghosts, because they can do anything. But I said, oh, this man could be anything. He can be soft. He can be hard. You know, he can be real. He can be not real. I mean, it just started opening up. I mean, he could be anything. He could be anything and do anything, and then he could be from any era. And then I started thinking, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if he's from a whole, so I mean, it just opened up like a slow motion rose. You know, you see the slow motion, the rose open up like that, the petals just open up, one thing led to another. That's the other thing I wish I will say before it's over. And in your writing, you know, start. When I talk about your goal, let that be your start, because what happens is that everybody kind of starts from the same place. And then as you start, then your life kind of tells you, you know, well, what's next? You know, what's next? And then what do you do? And then you think about your own life, and then you think about, you know, the woman you sat next to on the bus who looked like she had never been loved. Okay, what does that mean? You know, or you see, you know, you start, you have to just start.
Why did you name him Herman?
Oh, Lord, I took the day off when I named him Herman. I knew his name started with an H. He was Herbert, he was Henry, he was Harry, I don't know why, but I knew that his name started with an H. You know, I have a girlfriend who's a writer who told me something so wonderful. She says that when you're writing, in anything actually, and doing everything that you are supposed to do, you know, trying to write consistently, reading widely, going to workshops, you know, speaking up when somebody asks if you're a writer, all the things, being consistent, all the things that you're supposed to do, you're in the state of grace, and things come to you. In any kind of creativity, haven't you done that with your singing? When you're in the state of grace, you're doing what you're supposed to, and you know, you walk by someone with crinoline skirts, with a crinoline, and you hear that whoosh, whoosh. And you go, oh my goodness, that's wonderful. Oh, and you have no idea kind of where it goes, but you know that you want to capture it, and you find out, you go back to your, to your writing space, and you realize, oh my goodness, my main character. My main character wears crinoline skirts. That's why, when she was a little girl, she never got crinoline. I mean, if you get started, spirit will take you on. I mean that. And I don't say that often because then people get into another space of, oh, well, you have to channel the story. No, I'm just talking about the spirit that got you up this morning. The spirit that told you, have this kind of coffee, don't have that kind of coffee. The spirit that told you that, go back and help that woman. She needs help with that bag. The spirit that just moves through you. It's there for you. It's there for you like waiting, just tapping her foot, just tapping her foot. Oh, I wish she would call on me. Oh, I wish she would open herself up. Oh, I wish she would look at that person next to her who looks exactly like her main character, or who's wearing clothes like her. It's there for you. But you aren't in the state of grace unless you're doing what you're supposed to. It just doesn't come. It kind of recognizes those people who are doing what they're supposed to do. So, I was thinking about this. My main character, the male character, who's a ghost, and he was harried, he was all these things, and so I would just start as don't let things stop you. If it's not working for you, write X. When you get to that part, just write X. I love to write X, 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 which means for me, okay, girl, go back and fill this in. You need to think about this, but I don't let it stop me because I want to get to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I would get to this name, I would just write a capital H. And I was sitting there, and I was just looking at my work. And I was thinking about Lena. I was thinking about my character, my ghost character, and I said, "Oh man, that's her man." Now I said, "That's her man." I said, "Oh my God, his name is Herman. That's what it is. It's Herman." I took the day off. I was so proud of myself. It was wonderful because it wasn't contrived. Because, it can look contrived, but it did not come to me. But I knew his name was H. And so, Spirit kind of gave me that H thing, but didn't give, I had to do the work to do the, I had to do the work. Her man. I wrote her man. I was like a 14-year-old girl on her first love. I wrote Herman, Mr. Herman. I never gave him a last name. I don't really know what his last name is. If I write about him again, I'll have to give him a last name. I like the fact that he only had a first name. Yeah. Made him sort of, mysterious.
So we talk about black women and this whole notion of hypersexual, right? So oftentimes you don't have black women writers dealing with their own sexuality, writing about enjoying sex, because we're told you got the good girls and the bad girls, and the good girls don't. So although we may enjoy it, we don't write about it. Zane came onto the scene and gave us these very sexy, erotic stories, right? So was that also part of what you were doing when you wrote about this black woman having sex, having good sex?
Well, I mentioned my childhood because I always wanted to. That's what I wanted to write about. That's what I wanted to read. Mm-hmm. Toni Morrison says, you write the books that you want to read. Right. And so that's what I wanted to put on the page and put into the canon. I wanted that to be part of what's going on. The idea of they do it with women of color. Period. Latin women, Latinos are always the hot firecracker. Okay, and we're always the sultry, maid in the kitchen who seduced the guy in the house, or that's who we are. Either like you say, either you're a good girl, and this is 2020, and this is still embedded in many of our psyches. No matter how sexually free we are, we may be that way, but we're not going to write about it and let people know. Oh, I know what that feels like, and all the rest. My daddy said, as a matter of fact, it's conscious, but it's not easy. Even when, once you start writing, I just, you have to dispense with all of that. You can't have that, I call it that heifer in my head who's always saying, don't do that now. No, that's not right. Don't. I say, I have to tell her all the time, bitch, shut up. Because you do. You have to quiet that voice, and everybody's got one. Everybody's got one that tells you, hello, I love you. You look beautiful. Thank you so much for coming. Dr. Georgene. And you have to quiet it because it tells you, don't go for that job. It tells you all those things that you don't need to hear. Oh, don't write that. Now you're gonna have to read it out loud. It's one, and it's true. It's one thing to write in the comfort of your own, studio, your own home. But you have to go out and read it. So you have to claim that. So as I was writing it, I knew that I knew what I was doing. I wanted to do that, but I knew that I was going to have to claim it. That was the writing. It was going to sort of be the easy part. And when I did the first reading at home, I was just thinking my father was alive, and he was sitting like right there, and I read that. I read that chapter the whole chapter that I was reading, and I didn't look at him. I did not look at him. I did not look at him, and I looked at everybody else because I had read it in front of my Spelman sisters, and that was one. That was good. Then I read it out in public, and that was good. I could do that. Then I read it in my hometown without my daddy there, and that was good. Then I thought I was a big girl, oh man, I'm slinging it. And then I looked down and said, oh God, I haven't read in front of my dad.
What was his response?
My sister was sitting next to him and I didn't see it, so I asked him later, what did he say? What was he doing? And she said at some point he looked at me and went, oh well. That's the baby. That's the baby. The baby gets away with lots of it. But the idea that, Zane and I are friends, and I'm not I'm not dismissing her at all. But Zane's writing was one thing. I wanted to write literature.
Absolutely.
I always wanted to write literature. And so mine was coming from, I think, from a different place. Hers was coming from entertainment. I think that's what she would say. To enjoy the book and, talk about it. And mine was, I wanted to make a statement. I wanted it to be part of what people read. And I wanted, I didn't even think about freeing other readers. I just thought about it being out there, so you could. Well, when I said I didn't think about other people's sexuality. I was thinking about it in terms of the book.
So I think The Hand I Fan With is a deeply and profoundly spiritual text. So I just wrote a paper and had it published on spiritual eroticism and The Hand I Fan With. So what do you think about my idea of spiritual eroticism, since I am talking about The Hand I Fan With?
Oh my goodness, one of the wonderful things about a book, it just keeps on giving. If you put enough into it, it just keeps on giving to you. And Dr. Vess she opened up, she loves the book and loves the text. And she really opened up so much about it, about spirituality, because again, when you're in the state of grace, you write things sometimes that you don't even know. It comes to you. You write it for one reason, and you realize, oh, that, completely touches somebody in a different way. That completely opens up. And so you're writing about Ifa. Completely, you talked about the water and ocean. And I knew all of that. I knew it. So on some level, you know it. When you write a book, I tell my students all the time, we practice going, Because after you write a book and it comes out and someone stands up and comes up with something completely that you never thought about, and they want you to talk about how you came up with it, and you're thinking, you're telling me that that's what's in the book. So you go, that's interesting. And then you let them talk. But I am amazed when I talk with you and we talk about what you see in the book and how you bring, especially the spirituality. But I think that, that a level of love, which includes sex, is a spiritual act. It's got to be, for it to be really like love. It doesn't have to be, oh, I love you, but that love that, you're a human being and I'm a human being. I'm giving you this, you're giving me this, we're sharing this moment. I mean, how spiritual can you get? It's like church.
Right.
Coming
together.
It is. It's coming together in a sort of special way. You forget how naked, no pun intended, but how naked and vulnerable you are. When you're in a sexual relationship with anybody.
Yeah, know that.
Very, and lots of times we don't even acknowledge it because then it's too deep. You know how you don't tell, too deep, cutting too close to the bone. Wait a minute, how women will tell you, wait a minute, I can't hear that. That's what's going on with me. But it's very deep in that way. And one of the things that I honor about The Hand I Fan With is that I think so often about masterpieces of any kind, of paintings and all the rest, and how people come back to them. And that's why they're in a museum. You come back to them time and time again, because each time you come back to it, you see something different. You bring something new to it. It's new to you. It never gets old. Starry Night never gets old. You see something, you think something about the artist. It's there. So people come back to the book. Even I come back to the book and discover things. So that's what I thought about.
So you talked one time about a preacher using the hand I fan with as part of a eulogy.
Oh, Lord.
Would y'all have thought that?
It was,
that the hand I fan with was used as part of a eulogy. What do you think he saw in that novel to use as a eulogy?
It was a eulogy for a fairly young man who had 2 young children, was playing in the yard with him, had a heart attack and died. It was in Atlanta, and I got a letter from the widow's best friend, and she had read the hand I fan with, and she asked me to sign a copy. Well, I signed a copy and sent it to Susie. Susie was the widow, and she says, I know this will help her. I know it will. So I sent it right away, and she read it, and she was reading it, and so it was they were on the way to the funeral. So, this happened, very quickly. He died. She got in touch with me. I sent it right away. I may even been on tour and given it to her. And she started reading it. And she got into the car. You know how you get in the car with the family, and somebody in her family said something about the hand I fan with. And she didn't really think about it, but her friend who was with her was like stunned, like, really? And so they got to the funeral, and the eulogy, the preacher preached, he had read the hand I fan, and he talked about Herman being there for her all the time. He talked about, that the Spirit is still with you, especially somebody who loves you that deeply, and that, he knew the 2 of them, and he knew that it was like the relationship on the. Oh, it was amazing. I know all about the eulogy because she told me like every word of it. And how stunned she was. And the widow said she almost wanted to stand up and say, I'm reading that book. She said she knew that was inappropriate, but she wanted to say, I can't believe you're doing that. I'm just reading that book. So, it was a sign to her that it was true, that her husband was still there. It was, oh, my people coming in. So good to see them. Oh, my.
So,
excuse me, can I say something?
Yes.
I love this woman right here. This is Dr. Akiva
Harper from Spelman English Department.
From Spelman English Department. And she is the person who is responsible for the curriculum, including the novels of Tina McElroy, ANSA, and Pearl Clegg. And let me tell you, she put together a curriculum. She said, we didn't know she was doing it. Neither one of us knew she was doing it. She did it, and you sent me the curriculum. You may not have been finished at that point, but you said, and it was a thing of beauty. Oh, to see your work, just laid out in discussion questions, and it was just beautiful, and she's responsible. Nobody asked her. We hadn't asked her. She did it on her own and got it approved, and that's why it's I love you.
She is awesome.
Yes.
So, Tina, you also talk about the call, being born with the call. And then you also talked about when you were on tour. A couple of questions I want to ask. One is about the response. So you write about this call and Lena's experiences, particularly in Baby of the Family. And then so I want you to talk some about the call and what that means, and then also the response that you got from a psychiatrist calling in.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then the second question we're going to move into is talking about how literature provides a safe space to talk about paying for things, and then that takes us into ugly ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
The call. I talked a little.
And all your characters have a call, right?
Huh?
Don't many of your characters have calls, or your protagonists? Your main character?
Lena has the call, and there's some folks who have calls that we don't know that they have calls right now.
Okay.
But they do.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm talking about the call. Can y'all hear me without the? You need this? Yes.
And they also are recording, so yes.
Oh, okay. Recording. Okay, I'm sorry. The call. again, I was talking about your goal. And as I said, I grew up hearing, can I have that, please? Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering where it was.
Oh, man.
It's cold up here.
So I grew up, it was part of who I am, part of, like I said, it was what the kids played with, and people expected me to do it. Oh gosh, the people down at my father's juke joints and liquor stores would always ask me, "Baby, what'd you dream last night?" And I told them what I dreamed about, and they would get out their little numbers book and go, okay, a black horse, what's that mean? Let's see, and all that. And of course, if they hit the number, it's what we used to call it, oh, they'd buy me some candy or something, So it was again, unself-consciously black. I love that. It was just part of life. It was what we did. It wasn't anything unusual.
And Lena always won whenever she played.
Oh, Lord, always one. Lucky little baby girl. That's what the doctor said when she was born. She said, "Miss Mack, you got a lucky little girl here." And she is in some ways. In other ways, she's tragically unlucky.
And why is that?
Because that's life.
And also her mother didn't perform the ritual.
Oh, well, yes, exactly, yeah. Well, on two levels,
it's
exactly.
Also about the rituals.
It's
too,
also,
right?
very much ritual is very much a part of the book. Ritual is what sort of connects us, like primitively, Ritual at every tribe, every group, that has that ritual, and the ritual is what brings people together. And ritual sort of stays the same, So you feel comfort in going back to, okay, that's how it was done. That's how it was done. This is how my grandmother did it. It's kind of like cooking, passing down recipes. This is how Patsy was talking about yesterday. Yeah. This is just, you watch your parents. Black women are notorious for not being able to give you a recipe, because they put a smidgen of this and a dash of that and a little bit of that. Oh, no, a little bit more than that. Well, what's a little bit more than what it was? We don't know what it was to begin with. And which makes it all secretive, too. That's wonderful about it. It's rich, it's like F-E-C-U-N-D, fecund or fecund? Oh, it's okay. That's what we were talking about. Rich, greens, plants could spring from it. No, that's that kind of richness, and that's what I wanted to write about. We were talking about ritual.
So yeah, and also, but what happens to Lena and baby of the family that causes the call to be good, but also not be
bad?
Good?
Yeah, her mother didn't believe in all that old timey stuff. I call her thoroughly modern Nellie. But she was, Lena, the main character, was born in an all-black hospital in the small town of Mulberry, and she was blessed enough. She's always been a lucky little girl. She was lucky enough to have a woman who was a midwife, but who was now a nurse at this black hospital, and she knew what to do, as she said, for babies who were born like that. And she gets everybody out of the room after Lena's born, and she puts the call aside. She makes sure she doesn't, and make sure it's clean, and it's sort of floating on like a jellyfish, floating on the top of the water. It's just a thin membrane. It looks like nurses' stockings. So it's always white, regardless of the color of the child. She takes care of it and performs this ceremony by herself, where she dries the caul. She dries it on the dryer down in the basement, but what she really, in the country, they dried it over a red-hot brick. But she has to do what she has to do. And so she dries the caul, and she makes a tea from it, puts it in a little teapot, and pours hot water on it and steeps it, and then pours it out and gives it to the mother to give to the child, to blind her, B-L-I-N-D. I got this from Slave Narratives in WPA. One, and from Miss Bessie Jones, who was a wonderful midwife, one of the Sea Island singers, an icon. And so I got lots of things, like bits and pieces of things, and that was the big thing. That the child needs to have drink this call first thing before even get breast milk, to blind her, because she's gonna see ghosts. Can't help that. That's what she said. But this will blind her against the dark ghosts and spirits that are crazy, the spirits that are disturbed. where she only sees good ghosts. And she takes it and puts it in a bottle and takes it to the mother lying there with the baby who's there. And so she says, okay, now, Nellie, this is, you may think this is country stuff, but you know me, and, you need to give this to the baby, and she'll be so-and-so. And she's just saying, And when the nurse walks out, the mother tells her to the little baby, leaning on her arm, she said, that crazy woman think I'm going to give this stuff to my child. What's wrong with her? I don't know what's in this bottle. I'm not going. And she pours it out. She pours it out in a vase of flowers. And Lena's whole life just sort of turns. So she still sees ghosts, but she doesn't know if they're good ghosts or bad ghosts. She sees visions. She doesn't know whether it's from the past. She sees a fire in her house, and she doesn't know whether that happened a long time ago, if it's going to happen tonight. So she stays up worrying about it. She's different. The little girls at school, kind of ostracize her because she does sort of strange things. A strange voice came out of her mouth, and so she has this kind of love-hate relationship with who she is. Mm-hmm. The call is who she is, and she didn't get all those things. She didn't keep the call. She didn't know. Well, I won't say
Preserve
that.
The call.
That's for the future.
Right.
Look, okay, we won't go into that.
She don't find out to the end, though, right?
No, this is for a new book that hasn't been written.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I can't say that. Word to the wise, okay?
Yes.
Whatever you do in the book, in any of your works, realize that that's the reality that you're creating, and you can't go back and pretend that it didn't happen. For instance, don't kill off characters, for instance, that you may need later on. Let them kind of disappear or move to another town. You can do a lot of things. I wrote one sentence that I'm writing. The next book is about a little
favorite character,
Sarah, little rough and ready. She's the first real poor child that Lena meets, because they're very well-to-do, and for this small town. And she goes across the street, which she's not supposed to do, because she sees this little girl across the street who's about her age, and she wants to, go see her meet them. She looks kind of magical to her, and they're very poor. Don't know if they're going to have food for all the children, kind of poor. And she had never seen this, and her mother had told her when she found out she was going across the street, they're going to offer you, food, because that's what we do. Do not accept it. Don't accept it. Just say, I just ate, or Mama wants me to eat when I go home, because then she explained, kind of poverty to her. And Lena is just amazed at this. So because Lena noticed that when the little girl visited her house, her grandmama always gave Sarah the biggest pile of raisins. She gave her 2 oranges when she only got 1. And Lena loved Sarah, so she was happy with that arrangement, but she never really knew why this was going on, and why Sarah showed up for breakfast. Breakfast, she called it. She didn't know what breakfast was. Mm-hmm. That amazed me. Mm-hmm. That amazed me, that she knew about meals, but she never had breakfast. She called it breakfast, of course, breakfast. And she got used to it, just the time for breakfast, like she comes early in the morning. So that's my little character. Lena and Sarah actually have their first sexual experience, and that's what sort of breaks up. Her mother comes in and finds them, just child play, very serious on Sarah's part, because she's seen a lot. Mm-hmm. Child play, and she comes in and is very angry with her, and the mother has lost her job that day, and she walks in, and and she's just mad, period, and this little girl got money, and take your little ass back across the street, you'll find Mama, don't you come over here anymore. And she has to stay away for a while, and when she comes back, she sees all of the furniture, little sticks of furniture that Sarah had in the house, and they've been put out. Mm-hmm. And they don't live there, and she doesn't know where she's gone. And they moved it, and I write, Lena and Sarah never see each other again. Why did I do that? Because again, I'm writing about this town, and I wanted to write about Sarah, so how am I going to make it in this small town that Lena, who runs the town, is never going to see Sarah again? So do y'all want to know what I did? Yes. Oh, okay. So I had have her leave town when she's a teenager because something happened, something very, something very.
That's going to be in your next novel.
That's it. It's called From Here On Out. And so she gets a little stuff together, and she has an uncle. You know, everybody got that uncle that nobody wants to come around with, but he usually have a roll of money in his pocket. Nobody kind of knows where it comes from. And they were having something was going on, and and he realized, she said, "You can't stay here, huh?" And she says, "I gotta go, I can't, what am I gonna do?" And he gets his roll of money, rolls off some 20s, and gives it to her. And she's not 18 yet. She's a smart girl. But, you know, she was going to, you know, be valedictorian and all of that. She was smart. But she just missed graduating. And she goes and gets on the Greyhound bus and goes as far as the money takes her first, and she makes stops. And she ends up in Chicago. And she stays away for 40 years, for 30 years. And that's how I did it there. Now she's back, and the novel is about her coming back to Mulberry to sort of settle things. And I've had to do some maneuvering to make sure that they don't see each other.
So to go back to the other one about the call.
The call,
and
yes.
How
that again?
change your name.
Change her name.
I love Sarah.
It's Sarah. Oh yeah.
I have to read about Sarah. So anyway.
She doesn't see Sarah. She sees. She doesn't see Sarah, but she sees Mary. Right? Okay. Yeah. That's a possibility.
Right.
Yeah. But you do. You know the things that but it taught me such a wonderful lesson that I thought I knew that this is important stuff, and the decisions you make are important. Decisions you make, every decision, you're the creator. You have real responsibility.
So you're
The
on
call.
this book tour, and so the psychiatrist reads.
Oh, right, about the call. The call. Again, you see ghosts. You see, and many people kind of say we've had this experience recently of someone saying they think they were crazy, because Lena thought she was crazy because they really didn't. They played about the call. You know how something can be in your family and it's not. They laugh about it as a joke, but when people are there, they laugh about it. When it's all y'all sitting around the table, it's a little bit more serious, you know. So it's that joke kind of, we take it kind of seriously, but ha ha, you know. Oh, Tina sees ghosts, ha 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 ha. But kind of like, you see ghosts, baby? You feel anything in the room? What did you dream about last night? So I mean, it's sort of real on one hand, and on the other hand, you know, it's not. So there's a great deal of that, and especially from the South. For some reason.
So, like, for example, a friend of mine I just learned has a veil over her face. Was born with one, but she grew up literally thinking that she was crazy because she would see things, hear things, smell things. But her family, unlike Tina's family, rejected it and said, "Girl, you crazy. Get away from here with all of that."
And that it's evil and dark spirits, and darkness is all about,
right.
You know, about evil in that way. Not mysterious kind of darkness, you know, that you
Right,
want
right.
to, but, you know, evil, demons and all of that. So, you know, I did not grow up with that. So consequently, I wrote about it in a way that, you know, it was very spiritual, that you write about. And so many people, you know, you write a book and you just affect so many people. You have no idea how many people you affect and how you do it. And so when I was on book tour for my second book, people were talking about the veil, so they would talk about, you know, call and seeing things, and lots of people said they saw things when they were growing up. I got great stories. That's why actually I wrote the second book, because after I wrote the first one about the call. Everywhere I went, people told me something new about it. I said, oh, well, I got to use that. That's
Right.
too good. Let's write a whole novel so we can use all of that. But one of the most wonderful experiences I had is that I got a phone call from a psychiatrist in Milwaukee. He was white. And he worked he said he worked in the inner city, so he said almost all his patients were people of color. And he said, I was in the bookstore and I saw this cover. My cover is all done by Barnett P. Honeywood, and they jump off the shelf. They really do. They look, you know, you got to pick them up when you see them. And he said, I just saw this cover and it was so interesting, and I turned it over and I start reading it. And he said, I bought it and read the whole thing. And he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I had patients, especially from Savannah and South Carolina, from the coast, and they literally all said the same thing. You know, I see things, I think I'm crazy. You know, what is this about? I don't know what to deal. I see things. And he says, I have been treating them for schizophrenia, I have been giving them medication for it. He says I could give you the names of the people that I am going to go, that I completely changed the way that I dealt with them. And he said, do you know how hard it has been to get your phone number? I said, really? He says, well, you know, I'm just a person in Milwaukee. You know, I told the publishing company they're not going to give it. So they gave me, you know, an address where they, you know, you could send it to the publishing company, and then the She said, but I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to hear your voice, and I wanted you to hear mine, to say that I treat my patients differently now. Isn't that something? He said, exactly. Medication. He says, I've been giving them medication. He says, as a doctor, do you know how that made me feel? He says, but the fact that you gave me something to work with, he says, made me feel so much better. Made them literally feel so much better, and another way to treat them.
So we have
Wonderful.
a mutual friend, Omiyale Alicia, who teaches here. Did I see her come in? Who talks all the time about the importance of your therapist or whomever being grounded in spirituality and understanding of the culture. Mm-hmm. For example, I was ill. I was having heart problems, and they had me in ICU. I wore the heart Holter and all of those things, but they couldn't find out what was wrong with me. I went to a Vodun priest, however, who says, you know, I dreamed about him, and he says, I said, Pauline, I dreamed about you, and he says, yeah, you're going to die. I said, what the hell? He said, you're going to die, just as a matter of fact. But he did rituals for me. He made medicine for me that saved my life because he had a different understanding. So Omiyale always talks about the importance then of having someone who has an understanding of spirit, or having an African-centered psychology, which is one of her areas, and she's teaching this summer online, right? African-centered psychology. So had that psychiatrist then had such a course, he then would have had a more profound understanding of how to treat. So when you're looking at psychiatrists today who are giving our brown and black babies Ritalin, not having an understanding of our children. So Tina's book then, and so maybe what could happen is he'll have a conversation with others. And then begin a revolution in terms of how you treat these patients. Which then, go ahead.
But I was just going to say, especially being outside the culture, I mean, this is obviously someone who truly felt, you know, his responsibility as a, you know, as a healer.
As a healer.
As a healer, And he, you know, he used those tools, and, you know, lots of folks don't use the tools even when they have them. But like you said, to be even aware of the culture, I thought it's just an extraordinary step, a big step, you know, in treating people, in dealing, and just dealing with people, and dealing with your children.
Yes.
You know, to know that they have, you know, spirit that's moving in them, that's, you know, could be beyond your understanding, and they're doing things for, you know, a certain reason.
And also interesting too, because that same person I was talking about, her mother was born with the veil too. And as opposed to validating both of their experiences,
the
she
grandmother.
dismissed. No, her mother.
I know, but no, the grandmother was one of the people.
The grandmother was the first one to dismiss her daughter's experiences, and then she in turn had a daughter who was born with the veil, and she then dismissed her daughter. So even in invalidating her daughter's experiences, she was invalidating her own experiences. And the consequences of that, which is why we have to be grounded in our own African-centered culture so that we understand who we are. Even as we dismiss that part, we still are who we are, right?
Just because we dismiss it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So which takes us to the next thing so then Tina went and did something else that was very brave, I think, when you dealt with the mother in ugly ways.
Oh, Lord.
You know, because the black mother in literature is sacred saint. You don't talk about you don't talk about Big Mama. You don't talk about Mud Dear. She's the one that holds us all together. And then Tina writes Ugly Ways, and now you know better, the sequel to it. And she gives us a very different kind of black mother. And one of the things that resonated with me is how you talked about on that tour. It was one of your most painful.
Oh my goodness! It was extraordinary. I was not, that taught me not to travel alone, because I went to a lot of cities, maybe 15, and Ugly Ways is about a woman who insists on being called Mud Dear. which is, such an endearing kind of thing. And she's as far from muddy as you can get, She has decided she's going to be free. The novel also is about what does it mean to be free, especially for people of color, especially for women of color. And she's decided she's going to be free. She got these 3 little girls, they're like 5, 7, and 10, and she decides, oh, I'm just going to stop cooking. And she says, when I done that, my whole family done that. And she was just, a small town woman who, who her husband worked at the kaolin mines. They were in Mulberry. She didn't have much of an education. She finished high school, but she didn't have any skills. And, he was abusive sometimes, but in his mind, Papa was like, oh, well, I had one time, but, that wasn't nothing, And it brings up that whole period when, unfortunately, that we haven't uncovered, too, that was part of our culture, that men were abusive, and, that's listen to, excuse me, you were saying it, you reminded me of the singer, Billie Holiday, when you were singing. That's one of her wonderful trademark songs. But, that she had a whole repertoire about just that thing, about, man doing you wrong, and, you don't love him, and all of that. So I brought that. That was something that I wanted to delve into, but your question was about?
Just what kind of mother was she, and the effect it had on her children,
exactly.
And then the women in your audience.
Oh, my goodness. So my dear just sort of abandoned. She stayed there, but she abandoned her family, spiritually. And what does that mean when you're, 5, 7, and 10, and, you hear, when I done it, my whole family done that, meaning they asked each other, well, does that mean my dear don't not my family anymore? Does it mean she don't care? She stopped taking care of us. She stopped, and so they had to take up the slack, and all they talked about was Muddy. Muddy didn't wake up until she never put clothes. She became recluse because she didn't want to go out. She just was in her garden. She gardened at night. So they became, of course, the children of the crazy woman in town. The one who was so they grow up. Muddy dies, and they all come back to bury Muddy, but literally to bury all this. The corpse that they've been dragging around their whole life of the hurt and the abandonment and all the things that, that have been part of their life. And they come back to bury her. So their names are Betty, Emily, and Annie Ruth. And they're 3 sisters.
Successful?
Very successful. One has one's a cosmetologist. She has 2 hair salons in Mulberry. One is a TV anchor and journalist, and the middle child is an archivist. And I just made her an archivist because I love that word, number 1. And I would think to be an archivist would be like the best job, just all the time doing research and finding. I know that's not, I'm just looking at what I would love about it, just by myself a lot and discovering things and putting things together, archivist. But she got fired because she got crazy, as they say, she got crazy on the white folks one too many times. And so they finally fired her. But when they're little girls, they just decided, all they had is each other. Well, I wrote the book, and again, I'm going to have to tell you why I created Muddy. Mary Helen Washington,
yes.
the scholar, exactly. The first book that I bought when I got a job was Black Eyed Susans. And it's an anthology, and it's the first anthology written completely by black women about black women. And Mary Helen Washington she's the editor, and she wrote the introduction. And I read it, and when I got to, I was maybe 22, 23, I guess. And I got to the end of the introduction, and it said, we need more stories about mothers. We need stories about bad mothers. We need stories about mothers who don't want to be mothers. And it was like a big gong went off. Gong, when I read it, because I said, she's absolutely right. My mother was a wonderful mother, but she was complicated. She had a life before we came, We screwed up her life, the whole thing, that she was a woman who had, sexual life, and, who sold beautifully, but, never got to travel. So she had, and I started thinking about this, and I said, we really do need. So I set out to write Muddy, not, it's a bad mother so much as a complicated mother, So this resonated I've sold more books of Baby the Family than any of my books, even more than The Hand I Fan With. Mm-hmm.
You sold more books of Ugly Ways of Baby of the Family.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ugly Ways. Ugly Ways, the story about the three sisters. And so I would go on tour, and I could not believe how much this book opened up people, women's especially, discussions about their mothers. Because as you said, Muddy, we don't talk about mamas. You get your ass kicked talking about somebody's mama. And so, the book was a big book club book, but it was also a big book that people read alone and kind of, could think about it and that kind of thing. And I would go on book tour, and I was completely unprepared for this, and people would stand in line. I can see them now, holding the book, and they would lean down and tell me the most amazing, sometimes atrocious, painful, hurtful stories about their mother. And I knew that was the first time they had ever said this stuff out loud. And of course, they would always bend down. They would wait for their 5 minutes, and they would bend down and they would tell. And I literally would go back to the hotel room and throw myself across the bed because they were just pouring all these stories into me. I would cry. I would throw myself across the bed. That was kind of my ritual. I'd come in, I'd kick off my shoes, I'd throw myself across the bed, and I would just have to weep for a while before I could do anything. And I was unprepared for it. So I was at a store, and a woman I could see, you know how you see people in line, they kind of get you, and I was waiting for her to come down. And so the three sisters, she leaned down, and she said, I'm Betty, the oldest sister, who are you? And so, I went into my literary post, although, this is literature, and, this isn't a biography, and, I'm not just, regurgitating stuff, this is literature, and these people stand for this, and so, and this is fiction, so it's not true, and I did that, and she stood there just as patiently holding the book to her breast, and when I finished, she leaned back down and said very slowly, I'm Betty, who are you? Oh, okie dokie. So I sat back, and then I thought about it, and I told her, kind of what character was kind of mine. And that taught me how much they were taking this to heart, that they saw themselves in these women, and they had these, like I said, just atrocious. Nobody came in and leaned down and told me, I had a mother, and she was so kind, and said, nobody did that. They wanted to tell me the stories, and because we don't talk about it. And we got all that stuff festering and growing, and, we talk about it in our families, that's the way they did. But they didn't make any progress. All they were doing was going over the same hurt again. You remember when Mother did this? Remember when she didn't let us go to the party that time? Oh, that hurt my feelings so bad. You remember when Mother used to talk about my hands, and they were, that's what they were doing. And this book taught me that literature and books are safe places. They're safe places for you to talk about things that you never would talk about, because you have that protection of the book, you have that distance of a character, like I'm Betty, who are you? And you can bring up things. You can bring up things that that you never talked about. I always have another story, but a quick story. I see you looking at a newspaper in the Bay Area, the Contra Costa Times, which is sort of a left-wing, newspaper. At the time that Ugly Ways came out, they were doing every month, I think, they would pick a book and have so I guess a drawing or something, and five people were then chosen to come in, talk about the book. They recorded it. There was a journalist there, in the discussion, and then she would write a story about, the conversations and what it was. But the 5 people were like the lucky 5 people who got to talk about it. And my editor and bookseller, Blanche Richardson, of Marcus Books. So y'all familiar with Marcus Books? And it's the oldest African American bookstore in the country, continuous. There used to be one in San Francisco and Oakland, and the building was sold in San Francisco, and now there's only one in Oakland. And Blanche Richardson, who runs the store, is also an exquisite editor, and she edited The Hand I Fan With, and I would say, come on, and she says, slow down. She says, we have a treasure here. This is a treasure, and we want to treat it like that. Like wonderful for your editor to say, yeah. So, so she was there, and she said that it was interesting. There were five women, and it was a diverse. It's a Bay Area, so it was a diverse group. Someone Asian, someone Latina, someone black, couple of black women. And what they would do was talk about it. And at first, they wanted just to talk about it, and then the first one opened up and started talking about her mother. And she said, "Would you turn off the recorder?" Because she was recording, the journalist. And she talked about her mother. And then they went back to talking again. And then the second one said, "Well, I have a story." And she talked about her mother. And then all five of them eventually had stories. Not always horrific stories, but stories that they really, hadn't shared. Mm-hmm. Blanche reached over and said, she turned off. She was there. She said, and she told the story. Okay? They went back to discussing. The journalist was a young white woman. And she said, "Oh, well, hell." And she reached over and turned off. Everybody had a story, that they really didn't want to share on tape, but and it just taught me that we all, mother thing, whether you had one, whether you didn't have one, who raised you, who didn't raise you, that was so universal, and I didn't realize it exactly when I was writing it. You learn things in the writing. That's the other thing. You're in the state of grace because you're learning things. Things come to you. You're learning things as you're writing. I learned, God, I can't even begin to tell you about myself, about my family, about my journey, certainly about other people.
Okay, so as we transition, let's give Miss ANSA a hand. Peace and blessings, and thank y'all for engaging in that African tradition called call and response. Y'all responded to my call of peace and blessings, and what y'all just did was created some peace and blessings in your space as you move around, because your prayer is always, let me move through the world with peace and blessings, because that's what you also want to give out, so that everybody's lives you touch, they will say, I remember her because I received such energy, such peace, and such blessings from her. So when you all move through the day, move through your lives, always do so in peace, with smile, embracing people in your warmth, and strangers, because you never know what people are feeling, what they're going through, and your spirit, your energy, your smile can lift them up in ways that you would never have any idea about. But the universe will give you thanks when they can't. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the third session of our 49th annual Writers Workshop Conference, sponsored by the Department of English and Modern Languages. And I am so psyched that I get to hear Valerie Boyd speak today. She's going to be introduced, but I have to say, y'all know I named my daughter Zora when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God. Now, at that time, I had no intention of having children at all. I was a quintessential single woman, gonna do my thing my way. But when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God, I said, if I have a child, I'm gonna name her Zora. And then I read Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo by Ntozake Shange. Do y'all know who she is? The late Ntozake Shange, who wrote For Color Girls Who Considered Suicide, right? When the rainbows is enough. I read about Little Indigo, and I said, if I have a child, I'm going to name her Indigo too, Zora Indigo. And this one right here, Miss Valerie Boyd wrote this biography of Zora Neale Hurston wrapped in rainbows that was so exquisitely written. You did not know that you were reading a biography. You thought you were reading a story, which speaks to the importance of telling our stories and telling our truths, because we all got stories and we all got truths, and they all need to be told. And so to introduce our illustrious guest today is our English major, Beatrice Witten. Woo-woo!
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to read this with enthusiasm. She brought a lot of that to it. Can't read it with that much, but I'll try to compare. So Valerie Boyd is the author of the critically acclaimed Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston, which was hailed by Alice Walker as magnificent and extraordinary, by the Boston Globe as elegant and exhilarating, and by the Denver Post as a rich, rich read. Formerly arts editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Boyd has written articles, essays, and reviews for the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, Creative Nonfiction, the Oxford American Atlantic Magazine, among other publications. She is a professor of the journalism and the Charlene Hunter Galt Distinguished Writer in Residence at the University of Georgia, where she founded and directs the low residency MFA program in narrative nonfiction. Boyd is currently curating and editing a collection of Alice Walker's journals, which span more than 50 years. Simon and Schuster, 37th Inc. will publish Gathering Blossoms Under Fire, the journals of Alice Walker in 2020. And now introducing Valerie Boyd.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Good. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I appreciate the enthusiasm, and I want us to have a conversation. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey to write Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston. And yes. And we can also talk a little bit about the book I'm currently working on, the Journals of Alice Walker. Happy to talk about that, and just happy to answer any questions you all might have, especially as you think about your own careers as writers for the students in here, kind of the way, the stories that you might want to tell, whether true or fictional. And really, I would like to have us have some time for a dialogue and a conversation, okay? And I know many of you have read Zora Neale Hurston, and so you have your own Zora love, your own Zora stories, and, you know, I want to hear those too. How many of you have read Their Eyes Were Watching God? Okay. Their Eyes is required reading in 11th grade AP English classes now, so I know a lot of young people have read it. I didn't read Their Eyes Were Watching God until I was in college. And I had an excellent AP English teacher in high school. I grew up in Atlanta Public Schools, had some excellent black women teachers. My high school AP English teacher was Ora Cosby, and she was extraordinary. We read James Baldwin, we read Alice Walker. She even introduced me to Toni Morrison, but for some reason we did not read Hurston. So I didn't read Hurston until I was a first-year college student at Northwestern University. And I was blown away by Zora Neale Hurston, blown away by Their Eyes Were Watching God, but a little pissed off that I hadn't read it yet. I'm like, how could I not know this writer? Because she seemed to me to be that missing link, right? So for me, as a young black woman writer growing up in Atlanta, growing up in the South, my parents, my dad was from a small town in Alabama, my mom was from a small town in Georgia. And so the language and just the life of Janie, the character in Their Eyes Were Watching God, that language, that was the way my grandparents talked. So I could relate to Janie in many ways, and particularly as a 17-year-old, or she's 16 when the book starts, and she's embarking on this journey to know herself. And when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God for the first time, I was a 17-year-old college freshman, also embarking on that journey to know myself, right? So I could relate to Janie in those ways, but as an aspiring writer, I could relate to Hurston. I felt like Hurston was my literary grandmother. If Alice Walker was my literary mother, then Zora Neale Hurston was that next link. She was the literary grandmother. And I mean, you know how, I know you all might not want to admit it, but I know how I have literary fantasies. So Alice Walker is my literary mother. Zora Neale Hurston is my literary grandmother. But in a way, I also felt like, if I could just discover like real evidence that I was the secret love child of James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, it would all make sense. Everything would make sense, Like many of you, I was that odd kid out in my family. I was different from my family. I was the one who was reading all the time, who was making my parents watch PBS and watch TV, plays and things like that. So yeah, it's like I found my kind of imaginary parents and grandparents and family in literature, in the writers that I admired. So for me, reading Their Eyes Were Watching God was just like, wow, who is this writer? And how could she have written something in 1937 that still speaks to me so urgently across the decades? It was the 80s when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I just felt like, wow, this story is for me. And so I became a Zora fan. I became a Zora enthusiast, I had all the Zora coffee mugs, I had the t-shirts, I had all the Zora stuff. I was a Zora head. And I was a journalism major in college. I finished my degree, began working as a journalist, and I came back to my hometown and was working at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as a journalist. And I saw a little article, like a one-paragraph article in Essence magazine about the Zora Neale Hurston Festival that was going to take place in her hometown of Eatonville, Florida. And being the great Zora head that I was like, oh, I have to go to that. So I gathered a group of friends, and we piled into somebody's car. There were 4 of us, and we drove the 8 hours from Atlanta to Eatonville, which is just outside of Orlando, and we went to that very first Zora Neale Hurston Festival. And it was very small. There were maybe 200 people there. It was so small you couldn't lose your friends. You could yell for your friends to bring you a fried fish sandwich from the ladies of Macedonia Baptist Church. That's how small it was. And it was really, the hardcore Zora heads were there. Alice Walker was there. Ruby Dee was there. Those were kind of the big celebrities. And otherwise, it was just this odd collection of Zora heads there. And it was a beautiful sort of combination of a street fair and an academic conference. So you go to the events and then you go to the street fair. And so it was really a magical experience, but it was so small that everybody kind of got to know each other, or people would talk. And there was a bird, like a black crow, that kind of was circling all around at the street fair. And it got to the point where everybody at the festival would be like, oh, there's Zora. So it was like Zora was present at the festival through the form of this big black crow. Yeah, and so we just, felt that. Everybody felt that. And so it was such a magical event that I decided I was going to try to go back every year if I could. And so I did go back year after year, for many years. Every year there was my group of 4, the 4 of us from Atlanta connected with a group of 4 women from DC. And that became our annual thing. We would all meet back up there. We became known over the years as the Queendom at the festival. And we would just meet up in Eatonville every year. And the group would change. Sometimes one person couldn't make it, so we bring another 4th, or sometimes somebody in their group would change. And over the years, we developed this friendship that continues until this day. And so at the 1994 festival, something really magical happened for me, because it was at that festival that Robert Hemingway, Hurston's previous biographer, gave a talk that literally changed my life. So Hemingway he was a scholar at the University of Kansas, and he was giving a talk at that festival in which he critiqued his own book. So he had written a biography of Zora Neale Hurston that was published in 1977. When I read Their Eyes Were Watching God back when I was in college, I became this Zora head. So not only did I have the coffee mugs and the t-shirts, but I read everything I could find by her and about her, including his biography that had come out in 77. His biography was great. It gave me a real understanding of who Zora Neale Hurston was. And so fast forward 1994, he's giving a talk and he's critiquing his own book, pointing out things that he felt he had missed because he was a man writing about a woman, because he was a white American writing about an African American. And then he said this. He said, it's time for a new biography to be written, and it needs to be written by a black woman. Yeah. And when I heard that, I felt like, oh my God, that's me. Yeah. I felt such an inner calling. But I wasn't bold enough, Tina, to say, me, me, me. I was scared. I don't know what you do when you're scared, but I tend to do nothing. I'm like, freeze. Because at that point, the biggest thing I had ever written was maybe a 5,000-word magazine article. So the idea of writing a big book about such an important figure, somebody who was so important to me and to all of us, that was just daunting. I'm like, how could I do that? Even though I felt this inner calling, even though I knew, this was me, this was what I was supposed to do, I was frightened. So I didn't say anything to him. It was a weird thing. It was like, I remember Bell Hooks was at that conference, and she came up to me and said, so are you going to do that? And I'm like, that was kind of like the universe echoing that inner feeling. But I was still scared. So I basically didn't say anything to anyone. What I said to myself was maybe someday. I said, maybe in 10 years you'll be ready to do that. And so Zora seemed to have another timetable in mind, though, because about a year and a half later, totally out of the blue, remember, I didn't say anything. I'm just like sitting on this knowledge, like, okay, maybe someday. About a year and a half later, out of the blue, I get a phone call from a New York literary agent saying he's looking for someone to write a biography of Zora Neale Hurston. And he wants to know if I'm interested. And I was like, who is this? What is, But I also felt like, okay, that's Zora. I felt like Zora herself was saying, yes, you. The big finger of fate was saying, you're supposed to do this. Make no mistake. And so when he asked me, at first I said, well, what about this person, or what about this? He was like, I know all those people, I'm talking to them too, but I want to talk to you. And so at that point, I said, okay, I'm interested, let's talk about it. And so because I was at that talk that Hemingway gave, where he pointed out things he felt were missing in his book, what this agent asked me to do was come up with how you would approach this book differently than Hemingway's book. This is an excellent biography of Hurston that already exists. It's been around for 20 years. Why do we need another one? Even though Hemingway said we need another one, why do we? Because I had been at his talk and heard what he said he felt he had missed, I was able to go back to that information and put together a short proposal saying, this is what I would do differently. As a black woman, I wanted to write about Hurston's life from the inside out. I wanted to write what it was like to be inside her skin. He was a white man writing about a black woman, so he kept a very kind of respectful distance from her. And I wanted to do the inside story, right? So that was kind of the basis of how I articulated my book would be different from his existing biography. And so I put that together. The agent was interested. He helped me to figure out how to write a book proposal. I developed a book proposal. It took about 3 months to do that. It was an extensive document about how I would do the book, and I can talk to you about book proposals if you're interested in that for your own projects. And then he submitted the proposal to several publishers in New York, and we got a great deal of interest. Because again, there hadn't been a biography of Hurston in more than 20 years. So we had about 10 publishers interested, and I ended up going to New York and meeting with these publishers, and really it was a dream opportunity to just kind of choose who we wanted to work with. And I mean, it was funny because, you know, I had spent all my money trying to put together the proposal and put it together in a beautiful package. Fortunately, I have a lot of friends who are graphic designers and artists, so they did a beautiful like cover for me and all that kind of stuff. But my agent and I, he was a new agent. I was his first big, you know, I was his first big client, even though I wasn't big, I hadn't done anything yet. We were like, I remember us going to Wall Street Deli in New York, having lunch, and we were like sharing a sandwich because that's all we could afford. And we were like, we're gonna take over the world, you know, this book is gonna be great. We're like sharing our little tuna sandwich. But it was one of those moments that I can look back on with great fondness, because now the book is out and it has done well and all is well, you know. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about that journey to actually write the book. So, two stories I'll tell you about that. One is that once I decided I was going to write the book and got the book deal, one of the things I did was I approached Robert Hemingway, Hurston's previous biographer, and I said, do you remember that talk you gave in Eatonville where you said it was time for a new biography and it needed to be written by a black woman? Well, that's me. He invited me to visit him at the University of Kansas, where he was the chancellor. And when I got there, his assistant said, those are the Zora file cabinets. There's the copy machine. See you later. So he gave me access to all of his files. I mean, extraordinarily generous. So remember, it's like the mid-90s when I'm doing this, late 90s when I'm doing this research. He had done his research in the early to mid-70s. Zora Neale Hurston lived from 1891 to 1960. So people who were still alive, who knew her very well, her first husband, Herbert Sheen, for instance, was still alive when Hemingway did his research. So he had a 2-hour interview with Herbert Sheen. He had a 2-hour interview with Percival Punter, the man who inspired Tea Cake, the real younger man in Zora's life that she had a relationship with, who inspired Tea Cake and Their Eyes Were Watching God. He had these kinds of interviews, and he gave me access to all of this. He had transcripts, he had the audio tapes, and he gave me full access to this material, which was extraordinary. Because these people were dead by the time I was doing my research. So without his generosity, I wouldn't have had access to that material. And so that was amazing. And one of the things I learned in listening to those tapes and reading those transcripts was that he was really, in doing his research, he was trying to write a different kind of biography. He was really writing a literary biography rather than the kind of biography that I wanted to write, which was about the woman in full, right? So after my week in his archives, I sat down with him for lunch, and I was teasing him about being such a gentleman. Because, for instance, there was an interview with Bruce Nugent, who had been one of Hurston's contemporaries during the Harlem Renaissance and her roommate for a short time. And Nugent was recalling a relationship that Hurston had with a man that he felt was not good for her. And he was talking about this relationship, and Hemingway stopped him and said, oh, no, my interests are purely scholarly. And I'm like, let the man talk, right? So I was teasing him about that, and he said, I think, I mean, biography was different in the 70s than it is now. And so his approach was appropriate for that time, but it didn't give us the full kind of understanding of Hurston's life and how her work might have come from her life. And that's what I was trying to do in Wrapped in Rainbows. And so another thing that I found in his archives that was instrumental for me throughout this process was I found a letter to him from Alice Walker. So in the early 70s, when he was doing his research on Zora, Alice Walker was also doing research on Zora. And the two of them were like two of the only people who had discovered this amazing writer. So they were writing to each other constantly, and there was a letter from her to him saying, I want to know who she was. I want to know what kind of flowers she liked. I want to know what her favorite thing to cook was. I want to know, like, those kinds of questions. So my goal became to be able to answer all those questions for Alice Walker in my book. And so now I can tell you that one of her favorite things to cook was shrimp and okra. And that her favorite thing to serve at a party was cornbread and buttermilk, because it filled people up really fast, so you didn't have to spend so much money on it. You know, so those questions that Alice Walker posed to him about her regular everyday life, like those were the questions that I sought to be able to answer in my research. So my research took about 4.5 years. And that research took me on a journey through multiple archives where Hurston's papers are housed. Everything that was in her possession at the time of her death is at the University of Florida in Gainesville. A lot of her research as an anthropologist is at the Library of Congress in DC. A lot of her Harlem Renaissance correspondence with Langston Hughes, Bruce Nugent, and others is at Howard University in the Elaine Locke collection. So I was crisscrossing the country going to these various places where her papers are housed. Several of her original manuscripts, including the original handwritten in pencil manuscript of Their Eyes Were Watching God, is at the Beinecke at Yale. So I've been able to touch that manuscript, hold it in my hands. That was one prong of my research, doing that archival research. The other prong was going to find people who knew her and interviewing those folks. So I had to do that first because of the age of those people, right? So like, even though I would have preferred to have done the archival research first, by the time I was doing this research, anybody who knew Hurston as a peer, and again, she died in 1960, anyone who had known her as a peer would have been very old by this point. So I was trying to catch all those folks. So I was able to interview Catherine Dunham, John Henry Clark, who was a historian, and he recalled, you know, Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes had this big falling out in 1931 over the play they were working on together called Mulebone. And we can talk about that more later if you're interested, but John Henry Clark recalled a rent party. Well, it was a variation on a rent party that Zora had in the 1940s, and he recalled that Langston Hughes was there. And you know, a rent party was a party that people would have in Harlem when they couldn't really afford to pay their rent. So you would, you know, they would charge 25 cents admission, and that money would collect, and they would use that to pay their rent. Well, Zora had what Dr. Clark recalled as a furniture party. So she had gotten a new apartment, and she could afford the rent, but she didn't have enough money left over to buy furniture. So she invited people to come to the party, but you had to bring a piece of furniture for admission. And he said Zora was kind of salty all night because people brought forks and knives and little things that you could carry on the subway, but she still didn't have anything for people to sit on. But he recalled that Langston Hughes was at that party, and he said, I said, so really? I thought they had this falling out in 1931. He said, yeah, but they still like to laugh together. And that gave me comfort in just that friendship. Even though it wasn't the type friendship it had been, it wasn't completely gone. I also got to interview Louise Thompson Patterson, who had been the secretary who was working with Zora and Langston while they were working on Mulebone. And she was really at the center of the dispute between the two of them. And when I interviewed Louise, she was 94 years old, living in a nursing home in Harlem, and she was still mad at Zora. She said, all I recall about Zora is that she was crazy. And then her daughter had already warned me that you should go see her at different times of the day, she was more lucid some mornings than, different things like that. So I think the first time I went to see her was an afternoon, and that's when she was just kind of salty about Zora. But then the next day, I took her some treats. Her daughter said she liked sweets. And I brought some photos of Zora and Langston to just kind of jog her memory. And I was showing her this photo of Langston Hughes, and she was like, oh, he's dead, So she was much more clear about reality, but she was very helpful. It was really amazing to talk with some of these elders and get their memories and their perspectives. But when you're talking with elders about their memories, what I found was I didn't ask them, well, what year, do you recall what month you and Langston had your, I don't remember what happened 3 years ago. I can't tell you the date, but I can tell you the feeling. Right? So I was trying to get people to talk about those feelings. Like, for instance, I interviewed Zora's, one of her nieces who lived with her for a while after her after her father died. And this niece recalled, I asked her about, tell me about your auntie's closet. What kind of, and she was like, oh, she had a lot of white dresses, and it was mostly white and red. So those kinds of details about this woman as a woman, that's the kind of material I was trying to get from those interviews. I asked her about, well, what was it like living with your auntie? Like, did she cook in the evenings or what? And she was like, oh yeah, she would cook for me all the time. And we think about Zora as being this always on the road career woman and all that, and she was, but she knew how to provide a beautiful home for a young niece. And so those kinds of details I got from the interviews. And so those were really the two directions that my research took. And so let me just say, I'll just close with this one story, and then I'll take questions from you. So one of the things I did as I was embarking on this research, before I really fully got started, is I went to Zora's grave to ask for her permission to tell her story. Now, I think my agent was a, pretty no-nonsense kind of New York literary guy. So when I told him I was going to go to her grave and ask for her permission, I think he envisioned me holding a seance in the graveyard or something. He was like, well, what do you expect to happen? And I said, I don't know what I expect, but I think if I go and ask, I will be shown a sign of some sort. And so I went to Zora's grave, which I should say is now and was then beautifully marked, easy to find, because of the work of Alice Walker. Now, you all may not know this, but when Zora passed away in 1960, all of her books were out of print. And there was not enough money to pay for her funeral. And so people in the town where she lived at that time, Fort Pierce, Florida, where she served as a substitute teacher for the high school, and I interviewed several of her former high school students, they took up a collection in Fort Pierce to be able to pay for the funeral. But there wasn't enough money for a marker for the grave. So she was buried in a grave, an unmarked grave that remained unmarked until 1973, when Alice Walker, who was then a very young writer, 29 years old in fact, this was well before The Color Purple, well before everybody knew Alice Walker's name. Alice Walker had read Their Eyes Were Watching God. She had read Mules and Men. She had become this big Zora stan, and she decided to go find her grave and place a marker on the grave. So she made her way to Fort Pierce, Florida, to this weed-choked, segregated, snake-infested cemetery, found Zora's grave, and with her own money, bought a small, plain, gray marker that she dressed up with a quote from Jean Toomer. And the quote refers to Zora as a genius of the South. And so that marker remains on the grave and was there to beautifully greet me when I went to visit the grave, 20-some years later, after Alice Walker placed it there. And so when I went to the grave, I didn't want to go empty-handed, so I took some Florida oranges, which Zora loved. I took some money, which she never had enough of in her lifetime. And I took some Pall Mall cigarettes, because that's what she smoked. And I made these offerings and just internally said a prayer asking for her permission to tell her story. And I don't know what I expected to happen, but as I made the offerings and was getting up to leave, one of my friends was with me who had been there at that first Zora Neale Hurston Festival. And as we stood up to leave, she pointed and said, there was a black crow circling the cemetery. And she said, I think you got your permission. And that's really where the journey began. Thank you.
And so now we're going to bring up our fourth session of the day. So I'm losing count because it's just rolling. So we are bringing up to the stage again our Queen Sheba. And we are bringing up, this is called the rights of writing, the writing process. Y'all know I had to play with right? So we have Dr. Kelly DeLong, who is serving as the moderator. Panelist Capri Banks. Matt Curry, is he here? Oh, maybe not. Tamara LeBron and Queen Sheba, who will be talking about writing.
The topic of this panel discussion is the writing process, and we'll allow our panel to discuss the writing process, and we'll take questions if you have any. I would just like to begin with the idea of prior to actually writing, what should a writer do? And that is, of course, read. So every time I teach career writing course, my first question is always, what do you read? How much do you read? Because most of the process of writing is going to come from your reading. And if you think you can sit down and just write that great American novel without having read many of them, it's a hard thing to do. So I was hoping that the one thing that the panel can talk about today is how much they read. Take a guesstimate, right? How much you read and how much that figures into your writing. And also sitting down and writing, the process that one goes through, a writer goes through as far as time. Some writers spend 10 hours a day at their desk, while others write just for a few. And also how many days of the week, because I think something that student writers often don't quite realize, it's not like writing an assignment where you have a paper to write, so you spend a week writing it and then you're done with it. Writing, especially anything of any type of length, requires. Is this not working?
No, I'm just
okay.
so everybody would have.
Oh, great. Requires a practice, just like practicing for anything else. It requires daily practice, and very much like for a musical instrument or for a sport or anything like that. So that would be something hopefully that the panel can address as well in their writing. So I'll let them take it away.
Okay. The first thing you said was to make a good writer, they should read. People should read. I emphasize that in my classes and or when I'm teaching workshop as well. But I think a thing that you left out was that people also need to live. So it's read and live. So if you read and you're just still stuck in your house and you're not out experiencing the world and anything that comes with it, then you still don't have those situations to draw on when you're writing. So sure, you could absorb, 27 great American novels, but if you don't have your own experiences too, to be able to relate to how that resonates with you as a writer, then it's kind of like the faith without works is dead situation. So you could study all you want to, but if you don't have that practical practice in there, then it doesn't work. The other thing you asked was, how much do we read? Again, I think that's relative to today, because there is so much technology out there too, that you have to ask yourself, what kind of writer do you want to be? Do you want to be a novelist? Do you want to be a short story writer? Do you want to be a poet? Do you want to be a spoken word artist? Do you want to write in blogs? Do you want to write in magazines? Do you want to write in zines? Do you want to write for TMZ? So I don't think it's limited anymore, especially to the generation that we're teaching to just be this great American novel writer. Sure, that could be something that they might aspire to, but I also think that there isn't a ceiling on what and where and when and how much they could write. There are so many articles out there that are written online that are just as impactful as, a long story or a short story. And I think that's important too, to be the voice of the people in almost anything. So there's that element. So I have had a blog and some sort of writing situation since at least 98 or 99. So I write all the time. I have written for anthologies. I've written for magazines. I've had 2 of my own books. I have written, I don't know, there's a million things in different ways I've written. I made a career as a poet, so I write poetry all the time. How often do I write? I purposely write once a week, and I write on Tuesdays because that's the time I set aside to write for 3 hours a day. And I share that with my classes because we all have very busy lives. And I told them, I said, I had to carve out a time in my week that I'm going to sit down and write no matter what comes out, if it's trash or treasure. And then you edit through that and you find the gems, and then you go from there and decide what it could be. I also told them not to be afraid of segments. I have a thing called Segment Cemetery, which, never ends up being anything. It just is thoughts that you wrote down either on your phone or in your notepad, and you thought it was going to be something, you thought it was going to develop into something, and maybe it's not intended for the time you use it for later. So there was a third thing that he asked. What was it? How much do you read? How often and how much do I read? I wake up and I read Twitter every day. And I read Instagram every day because that is where my generation kind of overlaps from the X to Y to Z. I also do read every poetry book that I can find or that I have my hands on. I attend and participate, sign up for, and pay for every possible poetry, short story, writing, fiction class that I can afford to go to and have time for. I submit all the time. I get rejected all the time. I get accepted every now and then. And that is how my life has been. So I read a lot. I live my life a lot. I take adventure. I take risk. And that is the same thing that I do in my poetry. And my poetry and whatever writing. And I still write for some magazines. I've written for Niggas Who Read. That's a NEGUS. That's a magazine online for Black writers. And I've written for Essence magazine. I've written for a whole bunch of different kind of writing platforms, because I also tell them once you master or become a master of your writing, then you can kind of bend the spoon to what you want it to be. So read a lot, write a lot, experience a lot. Don't put a ceiling on what and where you want to have your writing be.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. I like you. I read every day. I love short stories. I'll be the first to tell you, a good short story that can start my day, and I am ready to go, especially if it's funny or it has me thinking, like going to see a Jordan Peele movie. So I love to read those. I love to share those. I write in some way, shape, or form every day. Sometimes I'm a Post-it note writer. Sometimes it's in a journal. Sometimes I take the Post-it notes and stick them in the journal, and that's my journal entry for the day. But for me, writing is very cathartic. It is something that I almost have to do, right? So when I feel myself being full or overwhelmed, okay, I know what it is. It's time to write. Okay, drink some water and write. You know how your parents tell you, drink some water, go lay down. Drink some water and write. The other thing is would you call it the segment cemetery? Segment cemetery. I have a lot of those, and because I have so many of those, I also don't really believe in writer's block because of the segments, right? So, short story about the segments. I had a chunk, like Lauryn Hill said, I had a chunk, and I didn't know what to do with it. It was just left off, in the middle. It was a spoken word piece. And 6 months later, I looked at it, and I was just kind of like, oh. And the rest of the poem came to me like that, and that was one of my best poems. So, get it out. Like you said, whether it's trash or treasure, write it down. It may come back to you. It may be something that you need to see at a later date. But rewrite and revision. Revision is the biggest part of writing. And so in teaching, I realized that there were a lot of high school English teachers who do not like teaching writing. They'll teach you English, but they don't want to teach you writing. And I can say that because I've taught high school for 8 years. And so when it comes to like grading papers, and I'm at the meeting like, I'm so excited to read the narratives, and they like, you can take that energy elsewhere. And it's because, okay, it's time consuming. It's something that I have to really focus on. And so I know that same energy is being put forth in the classroom. And so the students are feeling that, right? My teacher doesn't like writing. And then I get red marks back on my writing. Now my self-esteem is low about writing. So please know to get it down on paper. That's your one job. Get it down on paper. We'll deal with the rest of it, okay? And don't be afraid to write in your authentic voice. That is going to help you, because if you try to perfect something for someone else to read, it's not going to bring about the same satisfaction that it would if you were writing authentically from that piece in you that needs to be shared with the world.
So, Sarah Braun. I'm a professor here, part-time professor of English, and I'm a writer. And I do agree with DeLong and Sheba and Caprice that reading is definitely an important part of writing. You get to see how narratives work. You get to see how language works. You get to see how poems rhyme, or not necessarily rhyme, but the flow of the poem, and studying those elements really helps you as a writer. But I also agree with Sheba in the sense that you also have to live. Going out there, I like people watching. I go to the park. I go to the trails. I go to a coffee shop. I walk around and I see things and I observe things, and I observe everybody. I'm always looking and paying attention to the details, and from there, like, I gather ideas about characters, and I even think about what that person could be, and then just from there I magically have like a story about somebody, right? Also, Twitter is a good place to read, because I'll tell you, there's a lot of writers out there posting and announcing their work and posting their short stories. And so you get to read more of what's current, what people are doing now. And because of that, like, I called myself a fiction writer, but now, like, I'm into microfiction and flash fictions. And I even started dabbling with poetry, because all of a sudden I didn't consider myself a poet, but then I started reading some interesting things, and I was like, wait, I think I can do that. And so then I started doing that as well. So reading, what other people do, just reading anything that you can find, and finding inspiration from that is definitely a good way to develop your writing. And that goes to using your authentic voice, just writing from like within what's inside of you, rather than trying to make it look like, or fabricating something. Just be be honest. And at the end of the day, some of the stuff will end up in that slush pile, or, you know, that cemetery. But you could always go back and revisit it in a couple of years, a year or two later, and then something will be there. You'll find something. As far as like time to write, that's really hard, especially when you are teaching in, you know, 5 classes, 3 classes here, 2 classes at another campus. You know, time is really hard to find the time. But most of my writing happens during the summer when I'm not teaching. But I do find the time to get on my phone when I'm, you know, on the train, on the subway over here downtown, and start jotting notes. So I'm always writing. I'm always thinking. If something happens, I'm at the grocery store and something pops up, I'll pick up my phone and I'll like a little note, and then I go back to it. And sometimes it turns into something. Sometimes it sits there forever. But if you want to be a writer, you have to always be in the moment. If something happens, just write it down and then go back to it and revisit it, and it'll turn into something over time.
Oh, sorry. Jay-Z talks about it a lot, about, you know, making sure that I think they're kind of tangled up, they might fall, but that if you don't sharpen your skills, they leave you, whatever those skills are. If it's a push-up over, or if it's writing poems, or if it's writing short stories. And I think that cemetery, we're making fun of it, but it's really important. I don't believe in writer's block either. There's no such thing as writer's block. Writer's block is only your ego in the way of your next work.
If I may comment on writer's block, if you can't think of what to write, give yourself an assignment. Say I'm going to write about my grandmother and this time we did something together. It might be junk that you write, but it still gets the process going, and you never know, there might be a gem in there. Just might be just a sentence, or it might be a paragraph that you use for something else. Just give yourself assignments like you would in class. Sometimes the way professors give you writing assignments, give yourself one. When those times when you think, I don't know, I have anything to write about, give yourself something to write about and just force yourself to do it. It works pretty well for me, at least. Any other
Google
questions?
has 1 million gazillion writing prompts. You can never run out of writing prompts. Just Google writing prompts, and 50 billion of those pop up.
And just to talk about that really quickly, I always tell my students, don't think about what you're writing, write about what you're thinking.
Come on.
And if you write about what you're thinking, everything inside is going to pour onto that page. And by the time you finish and reread it, it's going to surprise you. So just pour it out. Do what you have to do till you can do what you want to do.
I've always made the joke, but jokes come from truth. I've always made the joke that if you can pay your rent with what you say you are, then you are that thing. So if you say, I'm an attorney, then you're able to sustain your life financially as an attorney. Sustain your life financially is subjective to whatever that may be. It could be ramen noodles in a 1-bedroom apartment, or that could be a mansion on the lake, whatever that means to you. So professionally, that's how I gauge it. I can't say that I'm a singer because I don't make money to sustain my life as a singer, although I do sing occasionally. Okay. Oh, when? Well, I got fired from Bank of America in 2001. So I had to sink or swim at that point. So probably between 2001 and 2003, I'm sure I was doing all sorts of odd jobs, but probably around 2003 when I hit the television twice in the same year, when I hit the Apollo in 106 and Park, and then that just opened the doors to more financial opportunities. So then I was able to sustain myself financially as a writer, and that's what I was doing to make money. So that's kind of when for me.
Yeah, I'm probably still not sustained just yet. It's coming. It's coming. But I wrote a poem when I was in my MFA program at Chicago State University, and it was Dr. Hakeem Matabuti, the founder and owner of Third World Press. I love him dearly, but he always told us, you'll never get published. That was his mantra, you'll never be published, which I thought was strange. But I had a poem. I wrote a poem on Hurricane Katrina, and it was published in the Stanford Black Arts Quarterly. And for me, that was epic. That was the beginning. And I mean, I had been on the school newspaper, you know, like I've been writing since I could write. But that, for me, that was the turning point for me.
I have a different perspective, you know. When I was an undergrad and I used to take creative writing classes, one of my professors would always tell us, you are writers. If you want to be a writer, just call yourself a writer. You're a writer right now. And so I took that and I said, well, then I'm a writer. Do I sustain myself at writing right now? No. But, you know, I still see myself as a writer because I write every day. I write when I can. And every time I get a little publication here and there, I'm like, okay, it's small, but okay. But, you know, can I make a living? No, I'm not even getting paid for that. However, I'm still a writer. So I think if you see yourself as a writer, then you are a writer. And, you know, that'll just build up your confidence and eventually you'll get to feel like, hey, you know, I got something published, me feels good about it, I guess.
And when you feel like it's part of your identity, that's another thing. When you feel like it's part of your identity, so even take out the like financial part of it. When you feel like it's part of your identity, then you've become a writer or whatever, a doctor.
That's what I was going to say. If you feel as though you can't live without it, it's like a piece of you. If you stop writing, just like a piece of you is missing, you're a writer. Trust me. There was a hand up back there.
I am a mass media arts major, so I'm not an English major, but I love to write and direct, so I visualize a lot of stories. But as a student, I find it kind of hard to be original and keep my identity within my stories when I'm given a prompt, and I feel like just my writing becomes trash because I have to write according to whatever a professor might want me to write to, instead of just telling a story that I might think about or that I might feel in the middle of the night and I just want to write about it. So how do you remain original and keep your identity within your pieces while still writing to a prompt?
So what would happen if Mercedes or Coca-Cola hit you up and said, I need you to write a short story or a film or direct something for Mercedes-Benz Dome or for the Hawks or for Coca-Cola or for Home Depot? How would you find your connection to those stories for yourself and then still make them your authentic voice and then still be able to get the points across that they want? So
Queen Shiva, my question is for you. You said you can sing. Can we just get like a little sample?
I'm sick this week. Y'all missed my poem earlier. Maybe tomorrow night when y'all come to the Poetry Slam Wednesday. And I sing rock anyway, so you know. Yeah.
Man, that's loud. So my question was, you said like, in order to be like a great writer, I guess you have to read and live. Like, what was your live to writing ratio like? Was it like as every time you did something, a new experience, you wrote about it, or was it like kind of like you gathered these new experiences and then put it on paper?
Okay. So the ratio is funny. Live 100%, right? I don't know. I mean, I write at 100%, but you know, like just not all the time. So there are days where something will happen and I'll be like, oh, I have got to write about this. I was randomly sitting at a breakfast spot and a guy that I had, blocked walked in, there was only one chair left. I was 20 minutes away from my house, and he literally sat next to me. And he was like, hey, is anybody sitting here? And I turned around like, hey, no. So in my mind, the whole time I'm eating breakfast, I'm just like, oh, God, you funny. I have got to write about this. You know, so the living happens like all the time. But it's those stories where you're like, oh yeah, I gotta write this one down. Like I'm gonna publish this one, you know? So I think that you just always live, you know, at 100%. And those things that come back to your memory that, you know, just keep nagging you or you can't really let go, write them down. That struggle with trying to write what you feel is appropriate for class and how you can fit your voice into that. But if you are true to your voice, then the uniqueness will come out in how you respond to it. So just, stay true to you. Don't worry about it being perfect for what the professor or the teacher wants. Like, don't seek to have validation from them. Seek to stay true to yourself.
But I think also with the teacher's comments, their comments are there not to change your voice or to give you a new voice, but to help you find your voice, to help you articulate your voice better. I remember we had a writing workshop before a couple of years ago with poet Quincy Troop, and a student said she felt that to revise meant that her stuff wasn't real, it wasn't authentic, right? But all of that helps you to become clear. So when your teachers mark up your stuff, that doesn't mean that it's not valid. It doesn't mean that it is a waste. It's just a way because they are hearing your voice. And part of writing, if it's not writing for yourself, is to write for an audience. And they are your audience. And so they can help you say, your audience isn't getting what it is that you're trying to say. So their efforts then, their comments, their remarks are all about helping you to finesse your voice, to make it clearer to an audience. Because we've all gone places and heard someone say something and we're like, what? That didn't make sense, right? So that's what their purpose is. So it's not, and so a lot of students feel that when they're getting comments, we are changing your voice. It's just trying to make you your voice be clearer.
Speaking of voices, I want to use this as a segue for tonight at 6 o'clock. You'll hear student voices. We are handing out the literary magazine, the CAU Review, and the pieces that were chosen from an outside judge as the best pieces in this year's review will be read tonight by students. So hopefully we get to see you there. It'll be at 6 o'clock, Carl Mary Ware in 102. Carl Mary Ware, all right? Any other questions?
Hi, I wanted to go back to talking about the writing process, and I wanted to know if, for everyone answering, if you had any specific things to yourself that you do to get you ready to write or get your mind, I know you said like there's no such thing as writer's block, but are there like any like types of things that you do that, get you ready to write?
I'll go first. I never sit down to write unless I've thought about what I'm going to write beforehand. So like the night before, usually before I go to bed, I'll just lie there in bed as I'm falling asleep and think, okay, tomorrow morning, this is what I'm writing. And then in the morning, that's what I write. That way I know what I'm going to write, and I don't sit down at the empty page and say, I don't know what to write today. I think about the day before.
Process in which, because I like to write early in the mornings, usually if I can get up and I don't have anywhere to be, I get up like 4 o'clock in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and then sometimes I will stare at the blank page, or I'll just like listen to music, or I will think about something, or I'll just like write random things until something comes up, because that's the only way to this is the only time I have, right? Because I'm teaching and I'm doing all these other things. So when I edge out that time, I make sure that I I'm as productive as I can be. Even if it turns out to be nothing or something that I will work on later, I don't know. I have something on the page. So my writing process is just put something on the page, whatever it may be, and then, work on it every day. Revisit that piece, see what's there. Can I work is there something that I can work with there, or do another brainstorming session if not. And sometimes, I get up in the morning and I'm full of ideas and something, so I'm not just writing like a crazy person. I've got all these great ideas, and then sometimes but I just have to be there to do it, otherwise it won't get done, right?
My most sacred writing moments are, I wish I could get up at 4 a.m. Are usually on the weekends. I'm laying in bed, I open my eyes, I lay there for about 10, 15 minutes, pop my journal open, and I just write until I can't write anymore. And then there are times where it hits me and I got to find the nearest piece of toilet tissue or paper towel or Post-it note. And I just got to get it down, and I got to stick it to my agenda or somewhere so that I can recall, what I wrote or where it belongs or, what happened. So yeah, it just happens all the time, but on purpose on those lazy mornings where I got an extra 5-10 minutes to spare.
I have a little OCD, so I like zoning. So I prefer like a clean space, maybe something to drink, pop my laptop open. I like to write in the middle of the night. Like I would start at 11, 12. I would go to 4, maybe. But, and then I like to be in a space where there's writing energy. And that could be with other friends. That could be still in my house, but maybe with people around. And that doesn't mean we're speaking or talking to each other or even sharing. That just is, that kind of energy is there. So a clean space is important to me. However, the other side of control is no control at all. And so there are those moments where I need to grab my phone to write something down, or a piece of paper or a sticky note or the back of my hand, or just, tweet it so the world knows it's mine first and whatever, you know what I mean? And then go back to it later. And so there's both sides of my neurotic brain. Yeah.
And I have a question for everyone. I was saying, where do y'all get your best inspiration from when it comes to writing? Like, where do you get your inspiration from writing?
Life mostly. Running into random people. I think things that happen that are not planned, those are like the best to write about. I was in Chicago recently, and I was getting out of the car, and I love wedge high top sneakers, right? But somehow the sneaker got caught between the car and the curb, and yeah, right. So, but it got caught between the car and the curb, and I was like, I was falling. I was going down fast. But in my mind, it was slow motion. So, I'm like, what is happening? How did you let this happen? What, did you trip? Did you fall? Are you okay? And I'm on my way to the ground, and I get down there, and I stay there for a minute, and I laugh. Meanwhile, my uncle is standing at the door. He's narrating the entire thing to my family because he thinks some random woman fell outside, not knowing, it was me. What was the question? Where do you get your inspiration? Right. So I want to write about that is what I'm saying. So yeah, it's those things that that I don't expect, or those things that made me think differently. When I went to see Us, I started a Google Doc and invited people to join so that we could talk about what we thought different things in the movie meant. So just things that make me think, or things that make me think, or things that make me laugh, or make me feel any kind of emotion. Those are my inspirations to write.
I don't know about the rest of the writers in the room, but do you ever have like your radar on like all day? You're like beep 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 beep. You know, I've written about stuff that y'all do in class. Y'all are hilarious. Y'all are so funny. And then the stuff that you think you're getting away with is hilarious. I talk about that all the time. Y'all, I have changed your names 4 times and y'all have become stories. So, yes, real life. I tend to make anything a tragedy to triumph. Even if it was already a triumph, like even if it's already a good thing, somehow I don't know, I always have this dark twist on things, even if it's just for a second and then just like leave people on the rise, because I feel like writing should, leave people up, whatever the up is. But I don't know. I get my inspiration from everything, all day, everywhere, all the time.
Similarly. Yeah. So yeah, we get inspired by the things that make us happy, sad, anything that makes you angry. That's how you unleash. Well, that's how I unleash. I'm angry about something, I start writing. If I'm happy about something, I write that about that as well. Something upsets me, I write about it. That's my inspiration. One of the ways that I get inspired by things that make me feel something. Yeah.